Yeah, Santoshji, you can start.
Sir, I'm just waiting. I'm just starting, sir. Waiting for indication of being live.
Sir, we are live now. You may please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. Welcome to ASSOCHAM, Social Stock Exchange in India, the next inclusive growth trajectory, the virtual colloquium. We are going to discuss on the emergence, sustenance, governance on part of this particular subject. Just to connect with the subject, all the participants and make them a brief about the background. I would like to just share some of the thoughts around. Today, India has voluntary organizations in the form such as trusts, societies, and NGOs. Approximately 180,000 of such organizations are tax exempted as per Income Tax Department. Strategic development oriented NGOs are first relief and welfare organizations. Second are community development based. Third ones are sustainable system development, and fourth ones are the people's movement. If we look at international experience, there are only 3 out of 7 SSEs set up across the world which are still active in Canada, Singapore, and Jamaica, whereas other 4 included Brazil, Portugal, South Africa, and the UK. There are a very few opportunities to raise organizational funding otherwise, and the non-profit voluntary organizations generally face financial resource constraints and are only a few financially they are sound. There is a heavy focus on project-based financing. Organizations listed on SSEs tend to be large. Most SSEs feature both non-profit and for-profit organizations. Developed countries with mature impact investing ecosystems tend to favor for-profit organizations or revenue-earning non-profits. Developing countries have a more encouraging approach to non-profits. And the importance of responsible and accountable civil society initiatives in boosting the development in India was clearly outlined in the report of the Steering Committee on Voluntary Sector in 2002 and in 2007, while submitting their reports for the 10th and 11th plan. The idea of a social stock exchange was first proposed in India by Honorable Finance Minister in her Union Budget 2019-2020, and more than 2 years hence, the SSC is finally beginning to happen. However, in this context, we acknowledge the contribution of Ms. Rosemary, IS officer, who is currently the director with Department of Investment and Public Asset Management, Ministry of Finance. She wrote in her article on Social Stock Exchange, a market-oriented technology-based solution for social impact investment paper. And her paper explored the possibility of setting up a social exchange in India, of raising funds for political or social causes in a transparent manner. SSE is a social stock exchange that will allow listing of specific public interest project schemes and those entities working for realization of the social welfare objectives. Today, we are here to learn from among any industry body. We have invited very, very eminent speakers for regulatory perspectives from SEBI. We have joined our guest of honor, Mr. Jeevan Son Parote. He is the Chief General Manager, Corporate Finance Department from Securities and Exchange Board of India. We have eminent speakers to share the perspectives of Bombay Stock Exchange, Mr. Hemant Gupta. He is the MD with VIL Startup Incubation Software. We have with us Mr. CMA Sanjay Gupta, past President ICI CMA and Managing Partner Sanjay Gupta and Associate. We have CA Dr. Ashok Haldiaji, Chairman ASSOCHAM Task Force for Accounting Standards, Sustainability Accounting and Integrated Financial Reporting, Mr. A. Sekar, and many eminent experts joining over the 2 technical sessions for 1 hour each. And we have with us Mr. Narinder Wadhwa, Managing Director, Sky Capital Services Limited, and the President of CPI. Is the member Managing Committee with ASSOCHAM. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you to this first ever initiative by any industry body on the social stock exchange in India, the next inclusive growth trajectory. And we have very comprehensive coverage in this program, which will be addressed by the eminent speakers, covering various aspects which are very important for the participants, especially those who are joining from NGOs, societies, and trusts, and others. So, without taking much time, I would request and invite Mr. Narinder Wadhwa to please give the welcome address to the August gathering over here. Over to you, Mr. Narinder Wadhwa ji.
Thank you, Santoshi. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to present welcome address and share my thoughts on today's program by ASSOCHAM. I thank ASSOCHAM for this initiative. In fact, this is ASSOCHAM is the first chamber who is doing this deliberation on social stock exchange. As mentioned by Santoshi, the background in 2019, our Honorable Finance Minister floated this idea of social stock exchange, and there were a number of deliberation by SEBI on this, and they have come out with the paper also. So ASSOCHAM is the one chamber where we have given our inputs. What should be the eligibility and what should be the size of the issue and why it is required. So and they constituted, SEBI constituted the expert group also under the chairmanship of Tata Group veteran Ishad Hussain ji, which recommended the eligibility criteria, what are the funding requirements, modes of papers which can be brought in these exchanges. So going back by the very purpose of this exchange, as you know, over the years, Indian capital market has undergone a massive transformation in terms of participation, intermediation, operations, reform, standards, and control mechanism. The markets have grown faster and become transparent, which has infused investor fear and won their trust also. We have unprecedented participation by investor during this COVID period. And looking at the size of the country and COVID episode, I think there was a need for social exchange also. With this, this is a novel concept in India. It is tested in various territories, various jurisdictions also. But the basic purpose of this social exchange is that it's a large country. We need eradication of hunger, poverty, malnutrition, inequality, and promoting gender equality by empowering the women and LGBT communities, training to promote rural sports and slum area development and affordable housing. So it's a novel concept for India and such that it is it's for not only for non-profit sector, but it is also for profit-making social sector. And as per the proposal, SSC can be hosted within the existing stock exchanges such as BSE and national stock exchanges. Mr. Hari is here. He will explain you how it's going to pan out. And there is a significance of social welfare enterprises in our country. And soon we are going to raise social capital in a transparent manner on an electronic platform, aiding the process of rebuilding livelihood ravaged by the coronavirus pandemic. These recommendations, if implemented as a package, can result in a vibrant and supportive ecosystem, enabling the non-profit sector to realize its full potential for creating social impact. So looking forward to today's deliberation, I'll pass it on to Santoshi again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Narinder Wadhwa ji, sir, for your kind welcome address. Now I request and invite Dr. Ashok Haldia, sir, for your opening remarks and comments, sir.
Thank you, Santoshji, Mr. Wadhwa, Mr. Sanjay Gupta, past President ICAI, ICMA, Mr. Hari K, Chief Business Officer, National Stock Exchanges, Mr. Hemant Gupta, MD, BIL, Ryerson Technical Startup, Mr. Jeevan Sonpore, Chief General Manager, SEBI, and ladies and gentlemen, indeed a great pleasure to be with all of you on this occasion. And let me first compliment and congratulate the ASSOCHAM for thinking about organizing this program. And as Mr. Santosh said, it is the first of the Trade and Industry Association to organize these programs. In fact, the not-for-profit organization, what makes the difference between social enterprise and not-for-profit organization? We have trusts, we have institutions, we have not-for-profit companies registered under the Companies Act, and they have been performing. Some of them are, I think there is a connectivity issue, so maybe my video is not working. Are you able to hear me, Santoshji?
Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir. We can see you as well.
Yes. So what is the difference? We have not-for-profit organizations, not-for-profit companies. We have a provisions under the Companies Act for CSR, which make it obligatory on the part of companies to contribute towards the social responsibility. And towards that end, we have about more than 5 lakh crore have been donated or contributed, if I use the right word, by the corporate sector for the social purpose. And the type and kind of the and not-for-profit organizations that we have, they match with any other commercial organization. Some of the not-for-profit companies are as big as some of the large companies. These companies are engaged in the commercial activities. These companies are engaged for all purposes. The not-for-profit organization, the name that is given to them is something misnomer in the present day context. In older years, there was a concept of philanthropy, there was a concept of donation, there was a concept of charity. And therefore, it simply thought that the money is to be distributed and its utilization has to be seen. And money has to be distributed for consumptions or for meeting the needs of the deserved persons. But the concept has changed. The not-for-profit organizations undertake commercial activities. They generate profits, they generate revenues, and they redeploy that profit and revenues into the business itself, into their social activities itself. What I'm trying to say is the not-for-profit organization of today is no less than an enterprise. The purpose is different, the motive is different. In a commercial organization or in a conventional companies, one would assume that they exist for making profits. They exist for the benefit of their shareholders and the stakeholders. But a non-profit organizations work without profit motive. Now, that being the case, the social enterprises also have the same motives. And profit making is not a sin. Making a reasonable profit is always regarded as good. The point is how you earn that money, how you redeploy that money, and how you utilize that money for the social purpose. So that being the concept, I believe it is but appropriate that the NPOs of today would be called social enterprises tomorrow. Now, once they grow up, they need funding. We have very limited conventional sources of funding in India. maybe CSR, maybe the personal contacts, personal efforts, maybe some events, maybe some advertisements, sponsorship, and of late crowdfunding by some organization. But that's not enough. If a social activity has to be undertaken at a large scale, then they have to be run and managed as an enterprise. And when they have to run and manage as an enterprise, they should have freedom to raise the funds from those who are willing to contribute for the social and charitable purposes. And therefore, need for action arises. And it's a very rightful thinking on the part of Government of India and the SEBI to have the social enterprises exchange board, because then these enterprises would have the ability to raise funds from others, and also since they would be guided by a regulatory framework, they would be guided by certain governance norms, they would be guided by certain disclosure and the reporting norms. The public at large, he would be in a position to generate trust and then deploy the money. I need not know somebody personally before I donate and contribute money. What I need to know is that what is this enterprise, who are the persons behind it, how is the governance mechanism, and how is the regulatory system. Now, if that is given, then it should be possible for me to invest into that. Not only me as an individual, but also I'm sure over the period of time, there will be charity funds set up, there will be social funds set up. Those funds, the purpose of them would be to invest into the social enterprises. And if you look at the SEBI guidelines on the social enterprises, they are fairly comprehensive. I would say, if you ask me in one sentence, their LODR requirements are as good as LODR requirement for other companies. However, that's important. However, they have been shaped for the purpose for which NPO functions, for the purpose for which the social enterprises are expected to function. With that difference, the LODR requirements have been modified, but then I believe this step would go along forward. Today, in UK, we have more than 1 lakh social enterprises employing more than 10 lakh people. Mr. Santosh gave a figure of 1,80,000. Look at the size of India. Is that enough? Is there potential for many more? Now, if they have to if we need to encourage, if today I as an individual, I have a project, I have a thought, I have people around me, I want to undertake a social cause, social purpose, how do I mobilize funds? Unless I have personal contacts. And I believe the Social Enterprise Exchange Board would facilitate that to a great extent. The norms that we see of the SEBI are fairly comprehensive, based on prudence, based and tailored to the requirement of social enterprises. With that, I believe this session today should be excellent. With the kind of speakers that we have from representing different kind of stakeholder, I'm sure that's a good beginning made by the ASSOCHAM, and I'm sure as we move forward, the social enterprises would gain up popularity and momentum in the India. Thank you very much, Santosh.
Thank you very much for your opening address. Now I would like to take opportunity of inviting CMA Sanjay Gupta sir. May I request and invite CMA Sanjay Gupta sir to please turn your cam on.
Audible enough? Yes, Santosh, I'm audible?
Yes, I can see you, sir, and hear you as well.
Yes, okay.
Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And I really compliment ASSOCHAM, especially Santosh, taking this initiative. I could see, this area, a lot of people are talking about this. And after our Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala ji in budget speech, when she talked about it, and basically the idea was that, to build up an electronic stock exchange, which is a fundraising platform and which is controlled or in the ambit of SEBI. And the idea is that, like in any voluntary organization who want to raise funds, like any company is raising equity or a debt, similar way, they can raise funds, or like a mutual funds for a social exchange can also raise the funds similar to that. Because if we look at our India in totality, we can see in the commercial capital alone won't be enough to feed, clothe and empower a billion Indians. So what was the idea behind all this? When we're talking about India, we could see, for ages, whether we talk about CSR or we talk about any other way, a lot of funding is being done. But finally, normally, sometimes you keep on getting a calls from a lot of people, said this is an NGO, we are doing this work, that work, and we want, we want your help for students or a weaker sections. But as an individual, it's become very difficult where to contribute, where not to contribute, which is genuinely doing a right cause or not. So what was the reason, what was the reason behind it to bring a transparent NGO? And if you look at the data also, when you want to know more about the NGOs, you hardly find much detailed analysis about the same. So, and even, if you look at the terror funding and all the security issues in the country, and we have seen in the past through NGOs and through other wire channels, it has been rooted also. So that was some of the basis, which was being started on. And we have worldwide we've seen, India is going to be the 8th social stock exchange. And we have seen out of the 7, only 3 are presently working. And mainly if you talk about the SSCs, they are mainly started from the lens of the impact assessment. And India will be going to benefit not from the knowledge capital, from the credibility, efficiency, and the networks. And definitely the Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange have acquired such much of skills and knowledge over the years, which is really going to help them out. And if we talk about we study in more detail what are the reasons for failure for other in countries where they could not do well, because there was a funding issue also. But in India, we can see even the social stock exchange, the funds would be originated from the public funds also. So that also, really making a lot of difference. But when we are talking about the things, we could see every year, let's say one company is contributing an X amount towards the CSR funds or towards the NGO. But if it's seeing over a period of time, let's say 50 crores or 100 crores has been contributed. But finally, what is the impact coming out of that? So normally the amount of money which is being given to NGOs and all that, but there's no study as such, what is the financial impact? What is the currently impact to the society? Apart from the financial, what is the non-financial impacts being done on that? So even the Ministry of Corporate Affairs are doing the studies, where there is a more than 1 CR investment, they have to go undergo for impact assessment. So idea was that, wherever is the need of the people, so there should be a donation, there should be CSR, there should be a charity, or there should be a funding. Idea is to raise them up. But finally, at some point of time, it should be self-sustainable. It is just not a donation kind of a thing where you keep on parking the funds. Even when we talk about the big PSUs and all the people about the CSR funds, over 10 years, you contributed, let's say 200 crores in the CSR funds. But what is the impact today? What is the value of that today? So idea when we as a cost and management accountant, when we look at the qualitative and quantitative data, so how to measure these performances? Because financial parameters is very easy to work out, but the non-financial parameters is very difficult. What is the impact you have brought to the social capital? What is the impact you brought to the human capital? I could see even Dr. Ashok Haldia, even there he's doing a pretty good job in ICI, IPA. There even in the insolvency and all these issues are cropping up. And with I was hearing his opening remarks, he was covering a lot of, I think, areas where the brainstorming is happening. And I'm sure, the way National Stock Exchange people and the very eminent speakers, I could see Josna Belipa would be there, Professor Vinay Datta. So this when they want to debate on this, so we have to keep in mind that whenever, there has to be a faith of the people, they're going to contribute. As Dr. Haldia was mentioning, when I'm contributing, I should not know I'm not contributing to an individual. I'm contributing for a cause. So when I'm contributing for a cause, I should be pretty sure it is going to be spent for the useful purposes. And any point of time, I can see their accounting, their balance sheets, their transparency. So the moment this comes up, I'm pretty sure, the way there are a lot of good NGOs who are doing pretty good jobs. And there are a lot of good people who want to do in this. But finally, at the end of the day, until unless common man does not get associated, I remember the days when the mutual fund used to be a taboo some point of time. People were a little scared. But now there is so much of inflow in the mutual funds. So similar way, that was the idea behind our Honorable Finance Minister when she raised, when even social stock exchange can raise the funds to like a mutual funds. So the moment the credibility, the transparency, and the accountability comes on these funds, and anybody can visit their website. They can see. Even we are a part of the Institute of Chartered Accountants Committee. We are seeing a lot of direction. A lot of issues have also cropped up there. There we are trying to analyze what should be the reasons, and there the best part is the role of professional is going to be very important here. And it is just not the finance professional. It is a various part of the society, people who are going to contribute on this. So I think that's a new opening, and I'm pretty sure, the way things are looking up, the way things are getting transparent, and the moment it got listed, I think a lot of floodgates are going to open. And when you go internationally, we could see there are a lot of people who want to bring the funds to India, but even they're not getting the legitimate channels, on the right channels. So the moment it is get listed on the stock exchanges, I think the floodgates are going to happen, and there's a new opportunity which is going to come. And the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and especially when we are saying for the people in the villages and the small places, when the projects will, we can see the viability then and there itself, I think is going to be really a new India. And I'm really thankful to the ASSOCHAM and all the things they have brought this concept very newly. And what I want, there should be more on the research on this. And I could see, there's a lot of research papers, what could be the reasons for the failure and why they could not take it up. And why is in India we have an advantage. So the moment when ASSOCHAM is going to do this advocacy with the different ministries and different NGOs, I think is going to make a lot of difference. And once again, thank you, ASSOCHAM, for inviting me being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay Gupta sir, for kind words, your address, and really appreciate your concern and the suggestion that going forward as with National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange, things move on towards this direction that we are perceiving forward. I think a lot of impact assessment on concurrent basis would be the really need of our going forward, and we are all set to go in sync with all the stock exchanges as well as regulators. And we will do our level best to and contribute in sync with, or inviting the participation of the stakeholders from NGO, society, trust, likewise organizations who will be really, and of course the beneficiary of the the society. So thank you very much. Now I would request and invite Mr. K. Hari, Chief Business Officer, National Stock Exchange of India Limited. Sir, over to you as we look forward from you to learn more insights, as there will be a lot of implications, intricacies, a lot of opportunities, lot of challenges may be there going forward. So how NSC looks forward, and how you may be better in a position to guide the industry bodies like us, and wherein we can contribute from our side. Over to you, Mr. K. Hari.
Thank you very much. Very good evening to all my panel members.
Mr. K. Hari, sir, can you please turn your cam on?
My camera is on. You can hear me, but?
Yeah. Now can see, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Please
you
go
very much. Thank you very much. Good evening to all the panel members and all the participants here. It's again, thank you, ASSOCHAM, for organizing this and having NSE on the panel. So many of you spoke before, have already set the context, and it's good to work on this new platform. And I mean, in India, I think philanthropy is not new. People, I mean, we have been doing this for thousands of years, and it's not only the individuals; it's also the business entities. Keep doing this over a period of time. And what's interesting to know is that it's the only country in the world to have mandated CSR for private enterprises. And seeing the success of channelizing CSR funds into various social avenues, it was an opportune time to, create a formal kind of a structure for social investing on a formal platform. So this was the objective in which I think the social stock exchange has been designed, and SEBI has formed the guidelines. We had a couple of committees which has given inputs, and a broad framework of guidelines and also been set. So that's where we are. I think one of the biggest challenges, as you rightly said, is today the NPOs is a visibility to the investors and donors. I think that's the biggest challenge. A couple of my previous speakers have also spoken about it. And by introducing an innovative instrument through which NPOs can assess the social stock exchange with the reporting standard and structure which gives transparency and also allows measurement, I think that is one of the key things which will revolutionize the state of play in the social sector. So that's where we are also working on this very closely. This will aim at addressing the pressing problem, as it will unlock large pools of social capital and enabling the commercial capital to partner with the social capital. I think that's where we are. If you go through the guidelines which has already been given in terms of SEBI, I think lot of things have come into play. For identifying a social enterprise, I think a couple of important criteria have been set on the revenue side and the expenditure side, and also the customer base. The target population to whom this eligible activity can be given. I think that given broad structure has also been made. And one of the important elements is that they have also very clearly mandated that corporate foundations or political or religious organizations activities performed, professional trade associations, infrastructure and housing companies, except affordable housing, shall not be eligible to be identified as a social enterprise. So the overall scheme of things has been put: who's eligible, who's not eligible, what are the various investment categories being there. So we're all set to move in that direction because the framework has come. Now we are there. So we have been talking to many NPOs. There are 3-4 of them have been really interested. So we are talking to them. In the meanwhile, we are forming the committee. We are forming the guidelines internally as well. We are happy to again engage with industry like you and with the institutions to get their thoughts and put them inside the process itself, so that when we launch it, we launch it with all the bells and whistles in the right place. That's what we are going to do. And we are very at NSE, we are very committed towards the financial inclusion, which includes capital formation that will prioritize social returns over financial returns. That's the key theme. And as you know, we started as NSE started as an exchange for wholesale debt market to start with. Then we went to capital markets, and then went to get a derivatives market and currency markets. So now this is opening. Definitely, as many of you pointed out, it'll have an impact. It'll give visibility for the donors. It'll know where people are putting money, what's happening, what's the disclosure. I think that's what the whole stock exchange mechanism brings on the table. So we'll be happy to work with ASSOCHAM and all the industry participants as well. As I said, we're already talking to 3 or 4 of them, very keen investors who have done a lot of work in this, and you should see something happening very soon on that. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Really appreciate the efforts taken by ASSOCHAM and all the members of the panel who put in a lot of efforts in bringing this to a stage where we are able to have this online conference. Thank you very much and best wishes.
Thank you very much, Mr. K. Hari, for your kind words and sharing your perspectives of NSE. And we look forward to your, keep contributing towards such activities that ASSOCHAM pursues in future, and look forward for your guidance as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, now let me take the opportunity of inviting Mr. Hemant Gupta, MD, BIL Recent Technology Startup Incubator Foundation. Mr. Gupta, there is positive, very good news coming in, flashing in the news as well. That and I congratulate you for that particular thing, which is happening, as you BSE has got the note from regulator Securities and Exchange Board of India on this particular social stock exchange part. Today itself, the news is coming. So thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to your contribution in this and guidance going forward, that how ASSOCHAM can contribute towards your initiative in this direction. And I invite you and hand over the mic to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you very much, Santosh. You guys can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, please.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you very much to ASSOCHAM and to Santosh yourself for organizing this on this very important initiative, which, as people have pointed out, was launched in 2019. And I think a lot of ground has been covered in terms of the advantages of having a social stock exchange, what has been done in other parts of the world, and some of the visions that that people have laid out for the social stock exchange. What I'll do is, rather than repeating some of that stuff, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the nuts and bolts of how this thing is going to work. Right? I hope that is okay with you guys. And to set the context for that conversation, I just want to take a step back and talk about the work SEBI has done in terms of stitching the journey together where we are today. Right? So when shortly after the budget announcement, SEBI actually reached out to several stakeholders in the social development ecosystem. As an outcome of that, put together the first working committee under the chairmanship of Mr. Ishat Hussain, which laid out the architecture for the social stock exchange. And that was shortly followed by the technical group, which laid out the operating principles. And that led to the various regulations that have come out from the Ministry of Finance as well as from SEBI with regard to the working of the social stock exchange. And if you look at what the working group did, the working group operated at a reasonably high level and did three things that I think will be crucial for the success of the social stock exchange. Right? One is they said that the social stock exchange is not a separate entity. It is a segment within the existing stock exchanges, right? Which kind of allows it to leverage the infrastructure, the regulatory framework, right? That has already been put in place, which has scaled very well in the last few years. The second thing the working committee did was that they created a new security type called the zero coupon, zero principal bond. The zero coupon, zero principal bond essentially is another word for a donation or a grant, but it allows it to become an instrument that can come onto a stock exchange. And one of the regulations that came out in July was classifying the ZCZP, as it's called, as an instrument, a security instrument. And the third thing that they did, the working group did, was that they also recognized the fact that for most of, if not all of the NPOs in India, the capital market ecosystem is a strange, it's an alien world, right? It's another planet. And they recognize the fact that there will be awareness and training that will need to be imparted to the not-for-profit organizations to allow them to leverage this opportunity of the social stock exchange. So they created this construct of a capacity building fund, a fund that is dedicated. It's like the investor protection fund, but it's kind of the other way around in the sense that it's actually dedicated towards educating issuers or NPOs on how to come onto the social stock exchange. Of course, a part of it is also dedicated to investors of the social stock exchange to make them aware of the advantages and the pitfalls of the social stock exchange. Right? So that's what the working group did. Right? They created the broad architecture and they created these three constructs, enabling constructs. The ball was then passed on to the technical group, which was responsible for putting in place the operating principles for the social stock exchange to work. And the operating principle, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of both of these groups, the operating principles that were laid out were actually to simplify the implementation of the social stock exchange. So the first thing that the technical groups did was they said that a social enterprise, whether it's for profit or not for profit, has to be able to establish the fact that it is social in nature, that the spirit or the mandate of the enterprise is to create a social impact. And for that, as was pointed out by Mr. Sanjay Gupta, there was a three-step process that was laid out, where you have to be operating in certain sectors. A part, more than 2/3 of your work has to be in one or more of the sectors, and you should not be in one of the banned organizations, such as corporate foundations, religious and political organizations, etc. Right? And once an enterprise that wants to list is able to establish that it has a social intent, then it follows two different paths of either being a not-for-profit or a for-profit. For-profit enterprises follow the norms of the segment that is applicable to them as from a stock exchange point of view, and not-for-profit organizations then undergo a registration process followed by listing of their instrument, which in this case will in all likelihood be a ZCZP instrument, right? There are additional disclosures that also were pointed out by an earlier speaker that have been put in place to ensure that the enterprise that is getting listed is able to demonstrate a track record of having worked in the social sector and having had made an impact. which will also help investors make educated decisions about which instruments to invest in and which not to. And then there are periodic disclosures that have to happen on the project for which finances are being raised to ensure that the investors are getting full transparency into what is happening with the project and with their money. The other key concept that was introduced by the technical group was the inclusion of social auditors into the mix. The social auditors are auditors that, similar to a financial audit, will certify the veracity of the impact that the enterprise is saying it has made. And there are norms that are coming out with regard to the social auditors by the ICAI. So that broadly, so between the working group and the technical group, between the constructs such as capacity building funds, ZCZP, and the segmentation, as well as the entry criteria and the listing criteria and disclosures, creates an enabling framework for the social stock exchange to work in India, and also distinguishes it from anything that's been done anywhere in the world, because nowhere has such detailed attention being given to the operating principle for the social stock exchange. And like you very rightly said, we have received the green signal from SEBI to launch the social stock exchange and BSE. And we are already speaking to several donors, investors, as well as NPOs on coming out with the first issue. So you should be hearing good news from us very soon. With that, I'll hand it back to Santosh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for enlightening with your kind words and sharing with us your perspectives of PSC, and we look forward for such guidance. And there will be a lot of engagement required for taking the educative discourse forward in a massive way, because so far the stakeholders on the recipient side or the benefit are not aware of. So therefore, I think there would be a lot of kind of engagement would be required when we would seek your continuous participation and support. Look forward to your such way of engaging with ASSOCHAM and
absolutely.
Yes.
Santoshi, there are several.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen.
Santoshi, I was just saying that there are several ideas that I already have on
Something. Please go on.
Out. Yeah. So there are several ideas that I have with respect to what you just mentioned, and we shall definitely have detailed discussions with ASSOCHAM on the same. Hi, can you hear me?
Is he? Thank you, Hemant Gupta, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me take the opportunity of inviting our guest of honor, Mr. Jeevan Sohan Parote. He's a Chief General Manager, Corporate Finance Department from Securities and Exchange Board of India. I invite you, sir, and I congratulate you and your team in SEBI for giving the kind of framework which the SEBI has released, and finally the responsibility comes to your department in SEBI to look after the various perspectives and the activities going forward by the stakeholders. They will be participating, and we look forward that how generally as an individual or maybe as an investor of this country, people are more interested and always keen to keep guided by SEBI, because the trust that the investors have more on a part of their investments under the regulation of SEBI is really which the credit is speaking themselves. So your guidance and support would be definitely on part of the regulation, which has to do a lot more than what we have done so far. So this is the beginning, and how do you how the ASSOCHAM body can contribute, and what do you expect? We may request you to please also in your speech guide us that what the next required from industry bodies like ASSOCHAM we can contribute towards this particular initiative. So over to you, Jeevan sir.
Namaskar. Good afternoon to all of you. first of all, let me first say that this is a very novel idea for a commerce association, a body of a commerce association to start a dialogue or a conversation on a social sector. So first of all, this is a very good idea. It's a good thing. And this is something that we were hoping that one day this particular idea will catch some kind of traction. So this is one good step in that direction. Thank you so much. And thank you, ASSOCHAM, for also inviting SEBI to share its views and experiences on the social stock exchange. I also have to confess that Mr. Hemant Gupta and my panel members that spoke before me have made my life very easy, because they are dwelled so much on so much of what we already put in place. So I'll just try to fill in some of the other issues from SEBI side that we have. So first and foremost, let me first accept that at SEBI or we in SEBI are not experts in this field, because this is an alien concept for us. And we are merely being facilitators for implementing the vision of the government, which the Honorable Finance Minister has announced in the budget. And we took 2 long years to learn the entire game, and we are still learning even today. If there is a new idea that comes in SSE, we are willing to take up and revisit this particular framework, or tweak the framework, or modify the framework as it is required to satisfy the audience, which are the investors that would be donating money to this particular platform, through this particular platform, and on the other hand, those social units that would be taking up or raising money from this particular platform. So this is a unique exercise in bringing in transparency and promoting accountability for funds deployed for charitable purposes. So that is something that has been the vision of the government, and I think we would like to believe that this particular venture that has been thrust upon SEBI, we would be able to discharge this particular thing through the social stock exchange. We realize that this responsibility cost on SEBI is very unique, and as unlike in other parts of the world, where in SEBI it is being housed under a securities market regulator, that itself is a unique proposition. It's a unique journey for SEBI, and also a unique and novel experience for team members within SEBI, and I'm sure to participants that would be there on the other side of SEBI. So we would be enthused to listen to them more, because we are not experts, as I said. So we will try to absorb as much as knowledge that they could provide to us. So there are, as Mr. Hemant Gupta has already mentioned, that there are some products that the social units can use. One is the ZCZP, the zero coupon zero principal instrument. Then there are some AIF structures called a social venture fund, so that can be used for raising money, and also mutual funds and others continue to raise funds for charitable purpose. That will anyway continue. I think the entire stress or the focus of our regulation is to ensure that the company, the social unit that is coming up to this for listing on the social stock exchange, has the credibility for having acceptability across all persons who are keen to invest in a social venture. So we have provided for disclosures which are not only as good as what we require of listed companies, but far higher than that, for the simple reason that we want that people should have some trust, people should build some confidence, some trust in this particular platform. And to do that, while today we talk about CSR activities, and we also talked about how a lot of fund has gone into the CSR activities, and unique concept where private capital has been mandated for CSR funding. The concept of accountability or impact assessment of the money going into the CSR is a very important component, and that will give it more credibility. So what we are working on is how to do impact assessment of or social audit of whatever is being spent. So any rupee spent by a donor or money given by an investor in the ZCZP, he should be able to see what is the impact he's making. Because though he's not interested in financial returns, he is more interested in to see how much his rupee is working for somebody's benefit. So that social return is what he is looking for, what he's interested in. And we are trying to put in place a framework along with the ICAI and NISM, who will bring in a new breed of social auditors that shall be certified by NISM, that will do social audit and then impact assessment, and then provide to the investor that, look, this is what you spent, out of this money that you had donated, so much was put in for such a purpose, and this is how it has been utilized and how much impact has been made. So this is the end-to-end usage of your money, and the impact made by your money is something that we want to give as a social return, or show to the investor about the social return. So this is one important component that I wanted to put forth. So this has not been done anywhere else in the world. Probably we are trying to do this, and hopefully it will be a good, we will be able to see a good success on this. The other thing that we realized, that this is a very new field, and probably the non-profit organizations may not be able to adjust to this particular new law, whether it be from the capacity building for knowledge, as well as from, let's say, on funds too. So we have proposed in the working group also, and as well as in the technical group, a capacity building fund being sponsored by the 4 institutions: NABARD, SIDBI, NSE, BSE, and they will be able to help out people, or help out social units that want to come here. So there will be some framework that will come out shortly on this particular format, so that some kind of capacity building measures they can take for enabling these social units to come onto the platform. While that being so, that there are 1 or 2 things more that social units will have to be careful about. Is first is scale. While Hemant Saab also mentioned that there are some broad criteria, there are 15 broad categories which they need to satisfy, where they have to demonstrate that the social intent is there. So those 15 broad activities already mentioned in the circular that they issued, and also the minimum spend that is required is 50 lakhs, and 10 lakhs should have been raised in the last financial year. And first, and I think this is the most important thing, it should have a valid registration under the Section 12A and 80G of the Income Tax Act. So, and having done so, they should also be again subsequently registered with the stock exchange to start raising the money on the social stock exchange. While you could have institutions that would come and register with the stock exchange but not raise money, but at least they would have come and qualified themselves to be registered on the social stock exchange. So as and when the time suits them, or as and when the need arises, they could tap the market for raising funds through either through the social venture fund or through the ZCZP instrument. So this is more or less what is on the framework of the social stock exchange. As regards ASSOCHAM, I think this is a novel venture. You started a dialogue on social stock exchange. It's a very good thing. I think we will surely take up this idea with the other associations and try to reach out to more and more associations, so that we will be able to do. As Mr. Hari K has mentioned, that NSE is already in touch with some associations for listing on the social stock exchange. We would also be interested to interact and see how we can best help them or enable them to cross the path and come onto the social stock exchange. And once again, thank ASSOCHAM for arranging this and having SEBI over to share their views and experiences on this particular. Thank you so much. Thank you, Santoshji. Back to you.
Thank you, Jeevan sir, for being here with us this afternoon, and for your kind words that we all of us are very much, we were curious about to learn from the regulatory perspectives as well. Thank you for being with us. In fact, the point which you mentioned about the impact assessment is really the need of our to look at, because there are multiple projects in different zones, geographic regions, as well as for the different purposes. So the impact is really something which is not so simple until and otherwise, if there could be one possible way of we may propose for consideration, if that can be the way forward, as similar to kind of indices. They reflect the proposition of how the economy is running about. And in case if the organizations go forward and they raise funds, if the project they implement in their projects those funds, then the impact can be also realized in terms of how the indices in terms of those impact can be measured. So I think impact assessment could be one way to maybe on concurrent basis, if that can be converted into some sort of indices based on the projects themselves. So this could be one idea. And you mentioned about the CSR related perspectives. So we have fairly covered in this particular these two technical sessions. We have very eminent speakers who will be addressing on various aspects of including the challenges, opportunities for social enterprises, as well as competition will increase because there are the larger society trust and NGOs. They have capability to raise funds. They have their compliance as per the requirement of the regulatory guidelines and frameworks. They are capable enough as comparative to the smaller ones. So how they will be doing the work, because they keep on in some ways struggling for raising the funds otherwise. So there would be another futuristic kind of competition between the bigger and the smaller. So how the smaller ones can be integrated. So these all such topics we have fairly considered and covered in the second technical sessions, including what is the interface between the section 135 of CSR companies and under the Companies Act 2013 vis-a-vis this SSE's regulation. So all such relevant topics we have covered, as well as on part of the accounting, auditing, reporting, governance in the social enterprises will be covered by our speakers. So thank you very much, all the eminent speakers, guests who joined in the inaugural session. With this, we thank you very much and look forward to your continued support and assistance in our endeavors going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I take the opportunity of now introducing the moderator and the panelists of the first technical session, who will be discussing on the international evolution, present scenario, best practices and success experience, as well as what are the amendments which have come out in ICADR regulation, and as well as the LODR regulation under the regulation 91E, 91C. So these all such topics will be covered, and we have joined by our moderator of this particular session. He is CS Manoj Sonawala, Principal Consultant, GRC Advisors Private Limited. We welcome you, Mr. Sonawala, and thanks for joining this afternoon and accepting my request on a very short note on to moderate this particular session. Especially for that, I welcome and thank you. And I introduce Ms. Shruti Agrawal. She is Director and Head Investment Banking and Corporate Finance from SMC Global Securities Limited. She will be discussing on international evolution, present scenario, best practice and success experience. And we have with us Mr. A. Sekhar, Practicing Company Secretary. He will be discussing on ICDR regulation amendments therein, covering the ineligibility to raise funds through SSE's platform. What are the procedure for issuing zero coupon, zero principal bonds? What are the overview of contents of the fundraising documents? Minimum subscription required, as well as termination of zero coupon, zero principal bonds. So we welcome you, Mr. A. Sekhar, Practicing Company Secretary, sir, for joining us. And we have been joined by Ms. Pammi Jaiswal. She is the partner with Vinod Kothari and Company. She will be talking on the annual disclosure by NPOs on SSEs, which have either raised funds through SSEs or are registered with SSEs. In terms of regulation 91C of the LODR, vis-a-vis disclosure of the annual impact report, as per the regulation 91E required for the LODR regulations. So we welcome all of you, the panelists, and I hand over the mic to the moderator, CS Manoj Sonawala ji. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Santosh ji. I must thank you first for giving me this opportunity, though it is at the 11th hour, but I am fine with it. I owe this to ASSOCHAM. Now, without taking much time, as our speakers on our earlier technical inaugural session say, this SSE is a novel concept in India, and as such, a bourse is meant to serve the private and non-profit sectors by channelizing greater capital to them. Now, an SSE providing an unified funding channel will act as an umbrella organization to monitor due diligence, reporting, and standardized disclosures of the listed social enterprise. This is the basic fundamental concept of the SSE. Now, these entities, that is social enterprises, encompasses non-profit organizations and for-profit companies under their ambit of social enterprises. Now, such organizations struggle for sufficient fund support. The idea of social stock exchanges prioritizing impact investment and social returns was first floated in India in 2019 in our budget by our FM, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman. Now it gained momentum during pandemic, bringing the spotlight on the need for social capital to relieve the adverse effects on the vulnerables. Now SSE is a regulated funding platform projected as an enabler of capital access for such social enterprises. Now all such social enterprises that demonstrate social intent and impact as their primary goal are eligible to participate in social stock exchanges. Now, such primacy will be determined by the public benefit test. So now, how this public benefit test can be arrived at, or there has to be some kind of a parameters or some kind of a guidelines. Now, this such primacy will be determined by the public benefit test decided with three filters as provided by the guidelines. That is a target population, activities engaged, and activity volumes. So these are the three parameters on which this will be guided. Now, I would request Mr. Sekhar to throw light on the criteria for stock exchanges to list themselves on the SSE and how the listed stock exchanges be able to raise capital through equity, zero coupon, zero principal bonds, mutual funds, social impact funds, and development impact bonds. Over to Mr. Sekhar.
Manoj Sonawala sir, just a request. I am in discuss with Sekhar sir, and he mentioned to better take Ms. Shruti Agarwal first for covering on the international evolution presents scenario, best practice and success experience part, so that the tone is set for the other panelists. Is it okay?
That is absolutely fine. As long as both are comfortable, I don't have any problem. So, as we know, presently stock exchanges, social enterprises, they receive funding via either CSR or philanthropic documents, crowdfunding, etc. Now, this SSE is providing a unified funding channel, will act as an umbrella organization to monitor due diligence and reporting and all standardization disclosures. So all that stuff we will be taking it afterwards. Now, see, globally, these social stock exchanges have been set up in Brazil, Portugal, South Africa, Jamaica, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Singapore. However, only the Jamaican, Singaporean, British, and Canadian stock exchanges are functional. Now, Ms. Shruti is requested to throw light on how these SSEs evolved internationally, what are the best practices which we can follow, present scenario in India and overseas, and the success experience. Over to Ms. Shruti, please.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj. I would like to thank ASSOCHAM first for giving me this opportunity to speak on the topic of social stock exchange in India. Globally, what we have seen is there is a phenomena where private funding in social sector is growing at a much faster pace than public funding in social sector. Despite funding being increased, there is still a lot of challenges both on supply and demand side that the social enterprises are facing. So, most of the non-profit organizations, the biggest challenge they face globally is access to capital for growth. And this capital is further restricted due to all the red tape, government policies that have been implemented. And challenges, they want a convenient process, they want reliable information, and they want the impact to be measured. They want that trust to be built so that they can invest freely in the social enterprises and the cause they believe in. To bridge this gap between the social sector and the private funding, a lot of nations implemented or institutionalized this social stock exchange. So a social stock exchange is a platform to bring together social organizations and investors and to facilitate funding. To the social enterprises of their own countries. However, even after this common denominator, the social stock exchanges are very unique in every country. And this uniqueness is driven by the different national contexts that they all have. Like the development needs of different countries are different, the country size is different, participation is different, the philanthropical ecosystem that each country has is different. The first social stock exchange was many countries, like Mr. Manoj said, South Africa, Portugal, Canada, Singapore, UK, Jamaica, that have opened social stock exchanges in their countries. It is important for us to understand what best practices worked, what did not work, what were the reasons for the failures, and how we implement the success stories in India. So we'll start with, the basic of the social stock exchange. What was the specific need? Why these countries came out with a social stock exchange of their own? Because this specific need actually influences the structure and the role that stock exchange will have in each country. So there is a drastic difference that we see between social stock exchanges of developed countries and developing countries. If we see developed countries, they essentially want a social stock exchange to mature the impact investing space that they have and to minimize functionalities of a conventional stock exchange. For example, if I take the example of the UK social stock exchange, they allow only for-profit organizations to be listed. They do not allow non-profit organizations to be listed on their social stock exchange. Only for-profit social enterprises could be listed. And even Canada, they have allowed impact investing funds. Though in Canada, social stock exchange, non-profits are allowed, but they are in minorities. Whereas if we see, the compare with the developing nations like Jamaica, South Africa, Brazil, their social stock exchanges, their aim was to develop overall social sector in their country. Their pain area was the funding gap in the non-profit social enterprises, because it is important to understand why in developing countries it is critical that the non-profit sector gets funding, because they are the ones that essentially deliver essential and basic needs. They play a very critical role to deliver these needs to the underprivileged, disadvantageous population. Another best practices that we have seen is independence and autonomy in leadership and decision making given to the social stock exchange. Though social stock exchange should work very closely with the conventional stock exchanges, because they can take benefit of the synergies such as process, the infrastructure, even investor base technology. However, it is important for them to have autonomy in leadership and decision making, so that they can safeguard the interest and the mission of social enterprises. So they have to keep that in mind. If we see Jamaica Stock Exchange, Social Stock Exchange, and Canada Social Stock Exchange, both have their independent governing board. Like Mr. Manoj said, a lot of social stock exchanges actually failed. And the biggest reason of failure was the less number of investor and donor engagement on these platforms. Less investors means less number of transaction, means less capital for growth for social enterprises, less revenue stream for the exchanges themselves. So it is very important for the stock exchanges to actually generate awareness, do campaigns, investor awareness seminars, both offline, online. All major social stock exchanges are doing so. Uh, both from investor point of view and the social enterprises point of view, and especially in India where we have a strength of a large retail base. It is important to understand how we can get retail participation also on the social stock exchange, because ultimately in India we should not be only dependent on the institutions and HNIs, but also build presence of the retail base. Thirdly, the social stock exchanges should have a viable business model. Now, what does that mean? That means that the exchange should have a self-sustaining revenue model. They should have revenue generation and income stream, like membership fee, transaction fee, consulting fee. Though all the exchanges receive uh, funding in the nascent years, in the setting up years of uh, in the setting up years of their life, but in the long term, they need to be self-sustaining. Like for example, the Jamaica Stock Exchange is actually aiming to retain 10% of the revenues that are raised on its exchange to survive in long term. And fifth, which we have already spoken about, is measurement of social impact. The social stock exchange should not only have strong measuring and reporting matrices, but also they should capture impact. Currently, the social stock exchanges are capturing impact like through amount of funding raised, number of projects that were financed, but key is to capture the wider changes to the social organization ecosystem, how much impact the exchange was able to create, and ultimately investor to account for that impact themselves. Talking about all these best practices, it is important to note that only three active social stock exchanges remain now: Canada, Jamaica, Singapore. So now that we are going to open our own social stock exchange in India, we have to keep these best practices in mind and understand deeply what did not work, why it did not work, and implement it in India in order to be a success story in India. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shruti. Really, it was nice that unless the exchanges are self-sustaining by way of either membership fees or a transaction fees or a consulting fees, they will not be in a position to sustain for a longer time. And we in India also have to learn from the mistakes or otherwise the pitfalls of the other exchanges. Thank you very much, Shruti ma'am, for this. Since you are on or other, I will take the questions afterwards also. I would like now to request Mr. Sekhar to guide us on how the entire system works for the stock exchanges in terms of registration. So how social enterprises becomes eligible, and what is the kind of a framework which we are anticipating.
Thank you, Manoj. And first, I would like to convey my thanks to Santosh Parasher for giving me the opportunity to share my understanding of this new technique or new system called social stock exchange. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, yes.
Santosh, can I make a presentation? Can I, because the sharing is not enabled. Share content.
Yes, sir. We are doing it.
You are doing it. So can you just show up the slides? Because it helps in drawing attention of the people also, and also helps me to, so it's not a very big presentation.
Can we pass on you the right of sharing, sir, at your end?
Yes, I will prefer that. But it's
so you just
Thank you. So I have the rights to share, right? So basically this social stock exchange, whatever we have this system, it is, I will be covering up the whatever amendments have come through the ICDR's section 292A, regulation 292A to regulation 292P. So I'll just make it in the slideshow mode, which will make it easier to. The regulations have given new definitions. There is a new concept called not-for-profit organization called NPO and for-profit enterprise called FP. These terms are all defined, so we'll be dealing with it: social auditor, social audit firm, social enterprise, and social stock exchange. So they have a specific meaning which is given in the regulations. We'll just quickly go through that. Now, what are the non-profit organizations? Now, this is quite interesting. Charitable trust registered under the Indian Trust Act 1882 is eligible. Charitable trust registered under the Public Trust Act of the relevant state. For instance, you have in Bombay Public Trust Act in Mumbai. So the relevant state registered trusts are also covered. Charitable society registered under Societies Registration Act 1860. Company incorporated under Section 8 of the Companies Act, and any other entity. SEBI has got the power to add any other entity which can be covered in this regulation. So this is an enabling provision which they have kept. Now, what is a for-profit enterprise? It is a company or a body corporate which is operating for profit, but which is also registered as a social enterprise for the purpose of this Chapter 10A. But it does not include a Section 8 because it's already anyway a non-profit entity. Now, social auditor and social audit firm. Now, this is an interesting definition, new concept. An individual is registered either with the SRO of an Institute of Chartered Accountants. Now, they have said, or other agency. It is understood that Institute of Company Secretaries of India as well as Institute of Cost Accountants of India are also trying to get themselves registered as a SRO. So, but we do not know, but this is just a bit of information which is there. And these individuals, they should have qualified a certification program conducted by NISM and hold a valid certificate. So NISM is going to conduct some course on that. They developed a module, and this certificate exam has to be passed by the by the person who wants to practice as a social auditor. Now, social audit firm is important, and that should employ social auditors, and they should have minimum 3 years for conducting social audit assessment. Now, what is a social enterprise? Only a social enterprise is entitled to be registered with the social stock exchange. It means either a NPO, which we have already seen, a non-profit organization, or a FP, for-profit enterprise, which meets the eligibility criteria. Now, what are the types of social enterprises? There are 3 types of social enterprises which are envisaged in these regulations. See, there may be some NPOs which may just like to get themselves registered with the social stock exchange. They are not going to raise funds, not planning to raise funds, but they would like to have the benefits of listing in the exchange. So that is also allowed. Then NPOs which seek to get registered with SSC and also raise funds. And for-profit enterprise to be identified as a social enterprise in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. Now, as we already understood in the inaugural session, it is a separate segment in a recognized stock exchange. Now, what is also important is it should have nationwide trading terminal. So that means today we have only NSE and BSE, which is entitled to set up a social stock exchange. And they are allowed to register NPOs. We saw what are the ones, NPOs, what are the NPOs, and they can list the securities issued by NPOs in accordance with these regulations. Now, eligible investors. Who can be the investors here? So only institutional investors and non-institutional investors will have access to SSC. That is very clearly provided. Now, these terms are defined in ICDR. Just to recapture, non-institutional investors mean other than retail individual investor and a qualified institutional buyer. And again, SEBI has enabling power to permit other class of investors as it deems fit. Now, interestingly, just some time back, Shruti had just raised a point regarding whether retail investors should be allowed. Now, this is something which, if we The retail investors means those who are investing less than 2 lakhs in an IPO typically. Now, whether they should be allowed is a matter which is there are divergent views, because retail investors, it is whether they have the means to judge and take a view as to whether the projects are having social impact or not. So if the retail investors should be allowed, then there should be certain safeguards also for them. Very important is that there will be a separate governing council for social stock exchange. It will be a separate section under a recognized stock exchange. And every social stock exchange shall have a governing council. Main function is what? To have oversight of the functioning of the social stock exchange. And the composition, terms of reference, etc., shall be specified by SEBI from time to time. Now, these activities which they have to carry on activities to establish primacy of social intent. That is very important, both NPO as well as FP. There are 17 activities which any one of these 17 they should engage in. There is a list. But when you go through this list of 17, it is definitely wider than the activities which are falling in the scope of CSR under Schedule 7 of Companies Act. Now, these are the entities which cannot be registered with SSC. One, corporate foundations, political or religious organizations or activities, professional or trade associations, and infrastructure or housing companies. Now, these 4 categories, they are not allowed to register, but there is an exception in infrastructure or housing companies. Exception is for those which are offering affordable housing. Now, how do the NPOs raise funds? Now, this is where an innovation has been done in the case of the Indian regulations. I'm not sure whether this system is there in elsewhere, but zero coupon, zero principal. It means there is no interest or any return which will be paid on the funds that is collected from the institutional investors or non-institutional investors, and zero principal. That means the amount which is received will also not be returned to them. So this has to be issued in terms of the regulations which are prescribed by SEBI. They can also accept donations via mutual fund schemes as specified by SEBI and any other means. So there is a open-ended that SEBI, if based on subsequent developments, if it considers that some other means may also be allowed, you could have that open. For-profit enterprise, how they can raise funds, you must be aware. You have the main board in every stock exchange. You have the SME platform or the Innovators Growth Platform, or also through AIF, including a social impact fund. Debt securities can be issued by them, and again through any other means. But a for-profit enterprise cannot issue zero coupon, zero principal bonds, which is allowed for NPO. Now, these 4 categories, these are all, debarred promote social enterprise promoter group or director. If they are debarred by SEBI, then they cannot raise funds through the SSC platform. Any of the promoters or directors or trustees, if they are a willful defaulter, then also, or a fraudulent borrower, fugitive economic offender, and also there is some more additional requirements, prohibition. Carrying on activities or raising funds is debarred by MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs, or any Ministry of State, central government or state government or charity commissioner or any other statutory body. So if there is any debarment, so the first thing to check is whether you are eligible to raise funds. For any NPO which wants to raise funds through SSC platform, they have to first check whether they are eligible to raise funds. Now, the zero coupon instruments shall be issued only in dematerialized form. Now, this could be a challenge in the sense that the NPO, or if it's a company, most of us are familiar, but an NPO should also need to tie up with NSDL or CDSL to issue these instruments in demat mode. So there should be enabling regulations coming in from the depositories as well. Minimum issue size shall be 1 crore. Cannot issue for a lower amount, and minimum application size shall be 2 lakhs. So naturally, this is how these retail investors are excluded straight away by this stipulation. SSC shall also maintain details of the allotment, and the ASBA also should be enabled. Now, fundraising document contents, what it says is that the exchange shall prescribe. So until exchange prescribes the contents, we are not very clear as to what are required. But there is a circular issued by SEBI recently on September 19, 2022, which talks about what shall be the minimum disclosures in the fundraising document. Now that's what I have described here. So they have also come out with some guidance notes in that as to how the document itself should be prepared. But the minimum disclosures which are required are vision, the target segment, which segment you are actually targeting to reach, what strategy you are going to follow to accomplish the vision, governance, of course, management, and all these are and social impact is very important, and the credibility in terms of this thing that registration, trust deed, etc. Some prescriptions are already there in this circular. It should have a registration valid for the next 12 months. And governing document is required to demonstrate the ownership and control, memorandum, articles, trust deed, bylaws, etc. Exemptions under income tax, that is very certificate under 12A, 12A, 12AB, that should be there. PAN, of course, will be required. And ATG registration is required. And it should be at least 3-year-old, a 3-year track record is there. And eligibility to be eligible to be a social enterprise in terms of regulations, which we have already discussed. And as minimum fund flows, annual spending in last financial year should be at least 50 lakhs. And funding in the last year as per audited account should be at least 10 lakhs. So these are the requirements, additional minimum requirements which are there for NPO in addition to what is already there in the regulations. These have come by way of this circular. Now, interestingly, this minimum subscription, in case of companies, most of us are aware at 90% we talk about. Here, the minimum subscription is 75% required. If it is less than 75%, then the entire proceeds shall be refunded. And you have a situation where 75% or more is subscribed, but it is less than 100%. Then the balance funds, how you are going to raise, and if you're not able to raise the balance funds, what will be the possible impact of the under subscription? So that has to be disclosed. And then we come to termination of the bonds. Now these bonds get terminated, unlike a regular equity shares which are perpetual, whatever is issued. In the case of ZCS, ZP bonds, terminate means after that there's no need to list it. And what are the two occasions when this happens? Object for which the funds were raised has been achieved and a certificate is submitted to SE. So the purpose for which you raised the funds, you have completely achieved what you wanted to do. You can furnish a certificate to the stock exchange, social stock exchange, and then that gets terminated. The tenure to achieve the object for which funds are raised. Suppose you have raised the funds and the object has been achieved, then also the time period is there. Sometimes you have a situation of time period. So if the time period is gone, then also the instrument gets terminated. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I hope I have been able to cover the basic requirements of the amendments in the ICDR. Incidentally, I just also like to add that there are some amendments in the outer AIF regulations as well. And in AIF regulations, basically they are by and large consequential, not much in terms of LODR is the other one which will be taken up by the next speaker. Basically, what they have done is they have enabled the AIF category 1 to also invest in social impact funds. They have enabled issue of social units by a social impact fund. And they have reduced the corpus amount for social impact fund at 5 crores as against 25 crores for the other funds. And minimum investment by an individual in social impact fund shall be 2 crores. So these are some, and then there are some additional consequential amendments which are there. So I have concluded my presentation. Thanks for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sekhar sir. You rightly thrown light on the criteria for social enterprises to list themselves on the social stock exchanges, and how then the listed social enterprises be able to raise capital through equity, zero coupon, principal bonds, and other AIF, how they they can raise through social impact funds and development impact bonds. So, Shekhar sir, since you are on this same topic, I would like to put before you, because in your presentation you said about Section 8 companies. Now it is talking about Section 8 companies, and under Section 1956, under Companies Act 1956, it was a Section 25 which was related to the Section 8 companies. So, whether the same companies, I mean, same Section 25 companies also will be included in that criteria or not?
My view is that there is no, I cannot see any intention to exclude Section 25 companies. In fact, Section 25 companies which were incorporated under 1956 Act, they have a track record also. But I think their exclusion is not intentional. But possibly I think SEBI might consider it worthwhile to come out with an amendment, saying that it also includes Section 25 companies. This is a very good question, in fact, because it is not mentioned specifically.
Okay. Can I request Mr. Santosh to take a note of this? We can then talk to Mr. Jeevan if required, because these are the amendments which we anticipate, or which we want them to consider for the going further. Shekhar sir, now there's you spoke about the governing council also. Now, how this governing council under SSE will safeguard against all the attempts at the impact washing? You know what impact washing I mean by?
Impact washing is basically it is a carve-out term which comes from greenwashing. Where what happens is you project that you are going to achieve a certain impact, but actually, if you see, there is no such impact being created. So now the governing council will have to rely on all documents, etc. So this is where the role of a professional comes in. Some kind of due diligence certificate or a report which should accompany the filing with the social stock exchange. I don't know how this, but definitely, what is projected, is it reliable? Is it can it be validated? Is there a genuine plan to do this? Or is it just an attempt to raise funds for something which is not going to create an impact? So, governing council has a lot of work to do on this point.
So, rather than verbosity, they should adhere to some quantification when they are projecting the things for impact calculation.
See, there are this impact, the social impact and measurement, analysis, etc. These are all highly subjective concepts. So
Exactly.
it's going to be quite a challenge. In fact, these kind of things happen everywhere. Even like the ICDR regulations, when now we are talking of even the SEBI is looking at revising some of the norms, for the track record, etc. There is some something on performance, how measure of performance, etc. So this is going to be a big challenge, and I think Shruti may like to throw some further light on what is the experience in other exchanges which are successful in this particular, that impact measurement, impact analysis. There is no ready answer as of now.
Shruti ma'am, can you please guide us?
I think, like in international social stock exchanges, one of the things that they are measuring is number of people impacted. So there have been, they are measuring, amount raised, number of projects done, but one matrix which have been successful is number of people impacted. So all the projects that are listed on the social stock exchange have to first kind of have a matrix where they tell how many people will be impacted by this project.
What method is adopted, which I had suggested in one of the write-ups, is that you have a take stock of the present situation and you project what you are going to achieve with respect to that metric. It can be any metric. It can be any metric, but what is important is principle involved in social impact is that you take stock of the present situation and you say what you want to achieve. And that is how it has to go. And SEBI has also given a lot of guidance in the technical group discussions if we go through, or even the circular which has come now this 25th September. There are a lot of guidance available for on this subject. But since the time has been short, I have not been able to go through them myself. This September 25 circular by also. So I think SEBI is on the right track, and I'm sure even the stock exchanges also will do this work, and we are all there to help them whenever they want us.
Yeah, so Sekhar sir, what you are trying to say is that first of all, there has to be a kind of a target population or the activities engaged in.
Yes.
It needs to be announced, and then post the period, then the activity volumes and the actually, as Shruti ma'am said, the population impacted needs to be calculated. So that is how the entire impact evaluation can be made,
Yes.
which will then help the governing council to arrive at whether the exactly what they had intended, the social enterprise had intended, or NPO has intended, has been achieved or not, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And but basically this is a two-way process. You see, what happens is the social enterprise will say, I want to achieve this.
Right.
And from the governing council, they should have that capacity to validate that. And this is where actually, you know, this becomes a multidisciplinary professional approach. Like one company secretary or a chartered accountant alone will not be able to do justice to such a project.
Right. Sekhar sir, you spoke about the subscription model where there is some minimum subscription has to be achieved, that is 75% or something of that sort, right?
Minimum subscription.
Yes.
Yes.
So what are your views on minimum subscription clause? Because is it not
correct? What I feel is, in fact, in a couple of discussions I had attended, what they feel is this minimum subscription of 75% or 90% if they had stipulated is relevant for a for-profit project. In the case of a social project, what happens is already a lot of effort has gone to raise funds. For any reason, they may not have succeeded to raise the full money. So the question is, the option should be given as to with the funds that you have raised. Suppose it is 74%. Just on the basis of this arithmetical number, that project cannot be taken up. So what the view was expressed was that if a lower amount of impact can be achieved, is it still worthwhile? What I was saying is, if a lower level of impact is going to be achieved with, let us say, 70% funds raised, then I think that project should go on instead of saying that it should be returned. So there should be a mechanism of review of cases where the minimum subscription of 75 is not achieved, but there should be some application of mind to facts and circumstances of each case instead of globally stating money on the basis of a number. This is what is my view.
That's true. Thank you very much, Sekhar sir. Now moving on to see, as you rightly said about the content of the how this stock exchange social enterprises has to be listed and all that. But there will be some. These are the some of the disclosures, and in your report also, means in your funding document also, you have suggested few requirement as to disclosures. But now annually also there will be some compliances pertaining to the stock exchange, the social stock exchange, which will be laying for these NPOs and stock exchanges. So may I now request Ms. Jaiswal, Pammi Jaiswal, to throw light on this, how this entire episode of annual reporting and compliances will be taken care of?
Thank you so much, Manojji. A very good evening to all, and I'm very thankful to ASSOCHAM to give me this opportunity. I hope I'm audible to all of you. Yeah. So I think given the paucity of time, I will simply come right on the topic. We are all talking about social stock exchanges, social enterprises, mobilizing funds and making a social impact. That's the crux, right? The whole idea of the government is to mobilize the funds so that there can be a social impact created. So when the funds go into the not-for-profit organizations as well as for-profit organizations, where does this fund go? Where is it utilized? Whether these organizations have the capability, they have the, the skill, the experience of carrying forward or implementing the plan, or whether they have any social objective at all. All of that, while the disclosures, I agree, they are subjective, but disclosures form a very integral part of this whole process, because the funds are going into the organization, and therefore SEBI in its September 9, 2022 circular has given guidance on the two major disclosures which are required. First is the disclosure, annual disclosures, which is to be made by the not-for-profit organizations which have listed their securities or which have not listed their securities but have only registered. So, Santoshi, can I have the sharing rights, please?
Surely, we are just sharing.
Yeah. So, coming to the first part, which is talking about the annual disclosures. The annual disclosures by not-for-profit organizations. So the disclosure talks on the three basic or three major fronts. One is the general disclosures. Second are the disclosures on the governance aspects. And third is on the financial aspects. Starting with the general aspects, it is very much giving the general disclosure about the organization, what is the name, from where is it operating. Third, vision, mission, and purpose. We were all talking about, right, that these organizations, what is the target? What is the social impact they want to create? Why are they targeting this particular problem or this challenge in the society? So this is the particular disclosure here where they need to mention that why are they specifically going forward and seeking funds to make a change in that particular area. So it's not important that each NPO will have all the three. In fact, this fact has been acknowledged by SEBI also in its guidance, that an NPO need not have or may not have all these three when it is getting registered or it is mobilizing the funds. But yes, having these three, that is the vision, mission, and purpose, for being registered on the social stock exchange as well as mobilizing the funds for creating a social impact, is a very important aspect of the disclosure. Next, we come to the organizational goals, activities, products, and services. So which is the particular area where this organization is going to work? How is it going to work? What will be the outreach? So for example, if I say that a particular NPO wants to make a difference in the education sector, it wants to provide education for all. So it is going to mention, like, whether the outreach is in terms of the thesis, or let's say in terms of the geography, or in terms of, let's say, the income, maybe the background, or little underprivileged class, etc. So the outreach of the organization is also required to be disclosed. The next disclosure talks about the scale of operations. When I say scale of operations, we mean what is the strength of this organization, how many employees are working, from where is it working, and whether at all it has created an impact or has any track record in terms of, let's say, district level, state level, national level. The scale of the operations needs to be disclosed on that front. The next two disclosures on the general aspects deal with the top 5 donors or the investors, as well as the top 5 programs. Now, this is important to show, what is the priority areas for these enterprises? Where are they working and who are their major donors? In fact, when you see this disclosure, the guidance given by SEBI says that you need to mention where has this money have been deployed, or what has been the cumulative outlay for this project, whether these goals have been aligned with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So all that needs to be provided under the general aspects. Next, coming to the governance aspects. When we talk about the governance aspects, this is again, in my view, a very, very important and significant part of the disclosure, because here we come to know about who is there behind the scene, who is managing. So talking about what is the legal form of the NPO, whether it's a trust, charity, society, or a company, what is the governance structure? Like, we're talking about the board of trustees. Are there any subcommittees, committees, whether there are any policies, internal control mechanisms? So all of that needs to be placed under the governance structure. Next, coming to details of the governing body. Details of the governing body would mean who are the ones who have been entrusted with the decision-making power, what is the, you know, their, let's say the background, what are their experiences, skills, capabilities, who are actually running these organizations. Who are the key executives and the key persons in the organization who are taking the decisions. Organizational level potential risk and mitigation plan. This again is very, very important from the point of view that because we are seeking to create a social impact, it becomes very significant to understand when we start this journey to make the social impact, what will be the hindrances, what are the potential risks, and what is the plan B, or you know, the mitigation plan for the organizations to mitigate the risk. Next is the reporting of RPTs. Now, this again is very, very crucial. Related party transaction disclosures for not-for-profit organizations. Currently, there is no specific guidance on this, because ICAI is already working on that. But there is, one can take a reference from, you know, this technical guide on accounting for NPOs, which is published in January 2022 updated version. And there they talk about who can be taken as a related party for such organizations, like the trustees, their relatives, or anyone who has the power or the ability to control the operations of these NPOs. And accordingly, the disclosures of the RPTs and the reason why the entity went for this RPT is required to be disclosed. Next, talking about the ethical mechanism or the mechanisms to take care of the conflict of interest in the organization. What sort of mechanisms are in place to take care of any conflict of interest that may arise in future, or what are the ethical standards which the organization seeks to take advice from, so that, because we are all talking about creating a social impact, and therefore the ethical part, you know, working on ethics, working on morals, and working on you can say the standards, it become very, very important. We are not here to make a profit, right? These organizations are not there to make a profit or completely commercialize the operations. While commercializing is not something which should be completely, you know, ruled out, but the primary objective should be to make the social impact. Next, we're talking about the remuneration policies. Now, remuneration policies here, it's a very interesting part that they've mentioned in the guidance, that when you talk about the remuneration policy, it's not only the policy that you're going to mention, you will also write what is the impact that the organization has created, how is that linked with the remuneration that you're giving to the key executives there in the organization, right? So that is again a very important aspect. The next part again is very important, stakeholder grievances. Just like, you know, in case of a listed company, they talk about how many grievances came in, how many were resolved. Similarly, in this case also, annually, NPOs will have to talk about the stakeholder grievances as well. Next, we're talking about compliance management system. This, I think, is again a very important aspect here, because the guidance states that there needs to be some head of the organization, like, you know, equivalent to the chairman or a CEO or, you know, someone like that, who needs to give a statement that all the regulatory, legal compliances are in place for this organization. So that also needs to be placed and be a part of this annual disclosure. And last, they're talking about the registration licenses, organizations, certificate, etc., which the organization has already taken. So these were the governance aspects. And finally, we are talking about the disclosures on the financial aspects. Financial aspects are two broad financial aspect disclosures. One are the financial statements, and the other is auditor's report and auditor's detail. Now, while they look very simple, but they are not, because besides the normal financial statements that we have for a company, like, you know, the balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, we also need to put in the program-wise fund utilization certificate, the percentage of organizational budget, the breakup of the budget, and the split of the budget across the projects. So here, what we just discussed very briefly was the annual disclosures by NPOs, which is to be made social stock exchanges within 60 days from the end of the financial year. This is one side of the story. Coming to the next is the most important, the annual impact report. Now, why I say this is important? Because we are all saying that we want funds so that we create an impact, right? So this is kind of a report card for the social enterprises, which is to be given by all social enterprises which have registered with SSEs. So please note, it is not only for those who have mobilized the funds, who have listed their securities, but all social enterprises, which includes not-for-profit as well as for-profit organizations. This report is to be given within 90 days from the end of the financial year and needs to be duly audited by the social auditor. This again talks about both the qualitative as well as the quantitative aspects. Has to be, because we are all talking about a social impact. So starting from the problem statement till the redressal, or to what extent have we actually achieved the results, is important to know. Next, we're talking about that this needs to be audited, and we are talking about a social auditor, which we all just learned that the social auditor or the qualifications, this is still in progress and will soon be out as to what are the eligibility conditions, etc., for a social auditor. While sometime back we were talking about, when Shruti was talking about the international side of the social stock exchanges, we were also saying that, there they talk about the numbers, the number of people impacted, or the number of people who are benefited with this, with these projects. So we have few examples, like, the foundations like Right to Succeed, which is a UK based foundation, and Oyster, which is again a US based organization. These are few examples of the annual impact reports which they have already in place, and when you refer to these, you'll find that most of the points that we have mentioned in the SEBI's guidance, these are already there. So we all can see these, and maybe we can understand that how the annual impact report will actually look like. So now coming to the annual impact report details. So this again takes its roots from the SEBI circular dated September 19. It gives a detailed guidance on what exactly they mean by annual impact report. Starting with the strategic intent and planning. So obviously, because we are talking about the social impact annual report. So first is, what is the problem statement that we wanted to address? What was the problem statement, and what was the manner in which the organization felt that it should address this challenge? Next, who are the target audience or the target segment, whether it is, in terms of they will need a perennial assistance or a time-bound assistance, or what would be the probable outcome of this particular program or project, whether the positive side or the negative side, both has to be mentioned in the strategic intent and planning part of the AIR. Once we have mentioned about the strategic intent and planning, next we move to the approach. When I say approach, as Sekhar sir was saying, that there needs to be some study on the problem, because unless we know how deep rooted the problem is, we will not be able to take out the best course of action to address the issue. So here also, when we talk about the approach, they have mentioned that there needs to be a baseline status or baseline study where we will know exactly where and how deep rooted the problem is. And then accordingly, we need to take out a solution or an implementation plan where we talk about whether it is going to be a perennial assistance or a time-bound assistance. Talking about a time-bound assistance, there has to be some exit strategy when you are, disassociating or leaving the subject alone. And if you're talking about a perennial assistance, if the problem requires a perennial assistance, in that case, there has to be some talking or discussion on the sustainability side of the assistance. Next, we need to also talk about the alignment of this approach with the sustainable development goals or any state or national priority lists. As I mentioned, that when we're talking about the top donors or the top programs, each of these are closely linked with the existing sustainable development goals, because the 17 activities which have been mentioned under the ICDR, they also, more or less are from the SDGs. You'll find many of them under the SDGs. The next point is considering stakeholder feedback. So this report card or this annual impact report is important because it will also contain, the manner you have sought the feedback of your stakeholders. How have you, approached them, asked them whether they are okay with the, solution that you've offered, and how well they have adjusted with the solution. So their feedback is going to be a part of this particular report card, and that's again very, very important. And next disclosure under the approach will be the biggest risks which the organization has encountered in the last 1 year, and what has been the mitigation effort from the organization's point of view. Last, we're talking about the impact scorecard. So it's like talking about the metrics where we are monitoring the reach, we are monitoring the depth, and we're talking about the inclusiveness of the total exercise by the organization. We're talking also about the impact on the target segments. And last but not the least, the beneficiary or the stakeholder validation, because here it is also stressing on the fact that it's not that what you have done for the society or for that target audience, but you've also to make sure that you carry out surveys, you carry out, take feedback from the stakeholders to know that actually there has been an impact. It's not something only on the papers. There's actually been an impact, and for that there has to be measures and mechanisms in place. So I think with that, I will stop here, and if there are any questions around this, I'll be happy to take that up.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pammi. In fact, what you narrated in your entire presentation was that the stock exchanges, that is social stock exchanges, though they are providing a unified funding channel, will also act as an umbrella organization to monitor due diligence, reporting, and standardized disclosures encompassing financial, governance, and social impact. Thank you very much, ma'am, for giving us the insight into the detailed presentation for giving presentation for disclosures and the annual reporting. One more last question from our side. Anybody can take it. Whether there is a scope for foreign funds coming to social stock exchanges, and if so, what would be the regulatory framework for the same? I think Sukti will be in a better position to take it. If not, or Sekhar sir.
I will make an attempt, but if there can be some improvements or refinements, I don't mind. Basically, when foreign investments, when we talk about, we look at FEMA, but these are not investments in that sense, like a for-profit, like in a for-profit enterprise. These are actually in the form of money received by way of donation or something, which actually is not going to be returned unless it is for a for-profit enterprise. For-profit enterprise, they have to comply with FEMA. But in the case of an NPO, I think the foreign contributor FCRA will apply. This is what I feel. So FCRA, whether any alignment is required to, enable the SSC framework better, is again another area of which SEBI and the stock exchange may like to look at, and the regulators may like to look at. This is what I feel. I don't know whether I'm.
Thank you very much, Sekharji. Can I request ASSOCHAM to allow us to 1 more minute if Shruti wants to say something?
So I would just like to add, what Mr. Shekhar said, that foreign participation is indeed very important, because even foreign investors as well as NRIs have keen interest in giving back to India, and that is where all these regulations will come in place. So it is important that we have clarity on that, and we increase foreign participation as well in the social stock exchange.
Fine. Thank you very much, ma'am. I thank all my panelists and request Mr. Santosh to take over, because we have, I think, exceeded the time by 1 minute. Santosh ji.
Santosh.
Yeah,
Yes.
Santosh ji.
Thank you very much, Manoj Sonawala sir, and all eminent panelists of this particular session who made all successful enlightening efforts for the benefit of the participants and enlightening all of us. We look forward to such contribution going forward, because we look forward that there will be a lot of miniature kind of the requirement of, and there will be a lot of intricacies, implications which will regard to the compliances. And to my understanding, there will be a lot of opportunities for us to help the societies, NGOs, and the trusts who look forward to avail the benefit of this SSE's platform. I hope that you all are set to go in sync with us, and we would keep inviting you for such talks at different times in such engagement programs. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope people would have enjoyed a lot of this outcome of this particular session. We are flooded of many questions with regard to the kind of social stock exchanges in sync with the CSR regulations, CSR policies. And I think this particular session, which is second one of the day and final one, would be very much useful to answer all such questions which the participants have already mentioned in the chat box. And we hope that we were not able to answer your questions because we first prefer to invite you to attend the second technical session, attend it, and then take away the things which you have written in the questions. I hope that all such answers would be automatically covered by our participating speakers over here. So I take the privilege of introducing over here the session chairman, CA Dr. Ashok Haldia ji. I hope he must be joining back in a minute time. And the panelists of this particular session, they are Miss Meenakshi Sharma. She is Technical Director with Capital Market, KPMG Assurance and Consulting Services LLP. We welcome you, Meenakshi Sharma ji, and may I request to please turn your camera on and let me invite you and introduce you to the participants over here. And Ms. Meenakshi ji will be covering on challenges and opportunities for SSEs as well as social enterprises in India, because the challenges we see that the challenges are not for one particular stakeholder. SSEs themselves will be part of it. So I think that opportunities and challenges go together. And we hope that the social enterprises, as they may have the opportunities and challenges both, therefore SSEs may have the same. So Meenakshi Sharma ji will be enlightening us on part of this particular topic. We have eminent, speaker, Professor Vinay Datta ji. He's former professor for School of Management and senior consultant. He has been senior consultant with the Sustainability Standard Board of ICAI. We welcome you, sir. He will be covering on future competition, financial prudence, and innovation to business models for NPOs. And finally, we have two more speakers here. Ms. Jyotsna Pelyappa, she is the founder with Blue Sky Sustainable Business LLP, and she will be talking to the audience who look forward for such questions that they have already written several questions in chat box, which include the interface between the CSR under section 135 as well as the SSE regulation. So what will be the change as to how social CSR projects are funded, implemented, and reported in the future? What would be the changes? So Madam Jyotsna ji will be covering. And in addition to this, she will be covering SSEs will create whether SSEs will create any competition between eligible NPOs, and how a small size of NGOs would be able to benefit, integrate with bigger ones, or compete and survive, because there could be the sustainability issue to the smaller NGOs who several of them, they might be in the process of getting registered while the seminar is being delivered. So they will be complying and fulfilling the objective of another 3 years. That's minimum required in all such compliances irrespective to the sector. So 3 years time period is very crucial even for the newer ones, or which would have already been registered a year or 2 years or 3 years ago. They might not be in a position to immediately take benefit out of it. So how they will sustain? And finally, the most important topic that we reserved for the day, that is, that cannot be escapable at all, which pertains to the accounting, reporting, auditing, and the governance of social enterprises, which finally matters to all the stakeholders, including the government and the regulators who finally, are responsible to come out with the impact that we normally look at. So with all these, sessions for this particular topic, we have Mr. Hemant Sabarwal. He's the practicing chartered accountant, and we invite you all to take this particular session together, and requesting first Miss Meenakshi Sarmaji. While I was expecting Dr. Ashok to join, but I can't see him, so to take the privilege and opportunity of requesting, welcoming, and inviting Madam Miss Meenakshi Sarmaji, Technical Director, Capital Markets, KPMG Assurance and Consulting Services LLP, to take first your topic, and then we move on to next speakers. So
Sure.
may I invite Miss Meenakshi Sarmaji?
Thank you, Santoshji. It's a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me here. I hope my voice is audible enough. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear your voice, please.
Sure, thank you. It's been a pleasure hearing all the speakers before us, and unfortunately I wasn't able to join at 3, but then later on I think I was a part of the earlier technical session that was going on, and absolutely remarkable speakers and what thoughts being presented. I think it's just a platter for all the people who are listening in, and thank you so much for joining us. I see a number of close to 160 people here, which actually talks about the relevance of the topic that we are discussing here. And I do imagine and understand that there are, in this technical session, yes, there are various important and very interesting and very intriguing topics also involved, commonality between CSR and social stock exchanges and impact assessments and all of that. And the last one, which is the most important one, I would say, is about the accounting and the reporting, etc., which has to happen. So I will try and keep my conversation briefer, but this will obviously have to draw from what people have said earlier and what we've been listening throughout. So I'm sure by now we all understand what social stock exchanges are and what are the reporting requirements. If you were to do it in India, how can you do that? And as Santoshji said, that while we are talking here, some of these social enterprises might just be preparing to get themselves registered and maybe list. So I think that is something that I understood, that you could also register, but list during the 1 year's time that is provided to you. I can already see Mr. Haldia has joined in. So good evening, sir. Good to see you.
I'm sorry, I'm just shifting from one webinar to another. So
Sure.
Sorry.
I can imagine, but if you would want to make any opening comments or
No,
so.
please, please you continue later on, I will.
Sure, thank you, sir. So I like to start from, I've been kind of handed over the topic on the challenges and the opportunities for both social stock exchanges and the social enterprises, and I would include the investors also, because without that, this whole mechanism doesn't really work. But that makes me go down the memory lane to 2019, basically, when a friend actually introduced me to this concept of social stock exchanges, and I'll be very candid that before this I had heard of it very, very briefly, but really did not get into the concept, because our previous speakers have actually told us enough that there are only 3 operational ones in the whole of the world, while there were many set up, but they couldn't survive, they couldn't kind of manage. So this was a very, very interesting concept that I heard for the first time in 2019. And then, of course, there was this working committee formed, and their report was there. And then there was this technical group formed. And I had the privilege of working very closely with some of the people who were there on those groups. And now we see that, finally, in 3 years, we have some regulations, some key regulations like ICDR and LODR for that matter getting amended, and a format to this structure, a format to this madness finally being there in India. A very important question. I am sure the people in those technical committees and working groups and at SEBI and at Helm of Affairs would have seriously thought about it, that if so many countries in the world couldn't make it, and only 3 are there, I'm sure there will have to be a lot of effort that has to go in to make the system work. So I think that itself is the biggest challenge that we have. right? So in the previous session, one of the panelists was talking about the leading practices. So while we are adopting the leading practices, but I think the challenge and the basic challenge will be for these social stock exchanges to survive, from India. And pardon me for being so pessimistic at the start, but I think I'm sure that this question has been dealt in with adequate kind of importance, because that is what the world is watching right now. And while Indian, I heard one of our stock exchange person kind of saying that the wholesome market cap of the companies listed on Indian stock exchanges even surpasses the GDP of the country. So that's a fantastic number to boast about. We're one of the fastest, amongst the growing economies in the world. Our capital markets are rising and everything. In middle of that, we've got the social stock exchanges, something which has an investor input, but pardon me, but an investment generally goes in with a return. So that's a little an anomaly also here, which has to be understood. And I'm sure there are answers to it, but I really don't have an answer. That will the investor stay hooked to an investment where there's no return, but we are told that there is a social return. Now, when I started looking up the regulations, I did not find a definition for social return. If I missed that, I'll be happy to be educated. But I understand that the impacts that are being drawn out of that is what is internationally called as a social return. So, okay, I will agree to that. But I think in this time and age and year that we are, or if I can call it the post-COVID era, we all have very well understood what E, S, and G means. And whether you like it or not, that is the, that is the it word or it term, if we can say. No, you like ESG, you don't like ESG, but everybody is into ESG, right? So I think the social stock exchanges have got a relevance there, where they're trying to connect the environment. The social, of course, is there, and most beautifully the governance aspect, because that is what was lacking with these social enterprises. Have been there, from times immemorial, they've been there. But I would say that a method to this madness, converting it from philanthropy to a systematic way of doing socially good, was when the 2013 Amendment Act came in India, when they defined CSR, and when they said that not only philanthropy, but something apart from that, you put it in a Schedule 17 activity and you call it a CSR. It was that time when it actually got methodized. And now with this social stock exchange coming in, I think we can say we are trying to democratize the concept of philanthropy, right? So this is an institutional way of getting all those NGOs and Section 8 companies and not-for-profit organizations and for-profit with the social initiative, or what is being called as the privacy of social intent organization, to be able to get funded, right? To get access to pools of capital that are sitting there. And while again, one of the challenges, and which was just debated like 15 minutes before, whether retail investors come in or not. But I think the regulations don't kind of, that is again a gray area, because they've been kind of kept out. But I'm sure that there should be a room, and maybe some work will happen, and they would kind of come in some times to come. But if you look at the change, the way perception, the way investor or consumer interest has changed, especially in the last 2-3 years, if you're dealing with millennials or zillennials, you will see that if they are buying something, and if they find some products which say that, these are sustainably sourced, or, the carbon footprint on this is much lesser than the other product, then they don't mind paying a little extra to be able to contribute, right? To the environment and to the community. So in that sense, if this was opened to the retail investor, then I think this would have really brought an opportunity for more capital pools to be available. So I think that is one of the pros that I would think of that could be. But again, an opportunity for social stock exchanges and social enterprises. The other thing also is that we've seen some of the failed enterprises in the world, some of the failed social stock exchanges in the world. I'm sure there are more than enough learnings that we have adopted, and these learnings will go in, but we should see that we do not repeat the mistakes, right? Another important, very, very important factor that has been brought to the left, right, center, and forefront from a social enterprise perspective is trust. And for an investor to make the investment and to stay invested, I think trust is the most important factor. And that comes in with the help of governance structures, that comes in with the help of transparency and disclosures, for which, various formats have been already put in place. So this trust factor will enable and will serve as an opportunity for not only the social stock exchanges, but even the social enterprises to kind of build up a really good business, a really good proposition. This would also kind of, give them access to areas where they have not reached. But again, on the flip side of it, if you see, while the larger organizations, which could be, for profit or not for profit, if you want to get registered on the social stock exchanges and then, get listed ultimately and access the pools of capital that are waiting, would be a little easier for the larger ones. But I think the intent with which the government wants to do it is to be able to reach that last mile, those smaller enterprises also, where, some guidelines have been defined, some frameworks are there, but enough awareness, I think, which is really, really important. And that has been one of the causes for the failures of the social stock exchanges in other countries, that the awareness till the last mile is important, so that we have equal participation from these smaller organizations also, and they can come and become a part of it and be able to reap the benefits as well. On the audit and the disclosure side, if we see, I think one of the other points that really needs to be seen is, and that's my view, if there is a little bit of confusion between social audit to say an impact assessment, because audit is a wider term, right? If you were socially auditing something, that's a real wider term. But impact assessment is actually impacting assessing the impact of the outcomes, while a social audit is the audit of the entire value chain that you would do. So I think there is a bit of a confusion that side, which needs to be really clarified. And also on the social auditor side, whether there will be rotation or, how will that be looked into, whether they'll be appointed by the companies themselves, whether the statutory auditor could again be appointed as a social auditor, or even the secretarial auditor for that matter. I think these are some of the flip sides to the current regulatory framework that has been proposed, which needs to be looked into. Apart from that, whenever companies are trying to list on any stock exchange for that matter, the larger companies, I would say, they would look at geographies or regulatory frameworks where it is a little cost effective. So getting listed, onboarded to a stock exchange will have its own compliance costs and issues also that these kind of not-for-profit, for-profit, I'm sure, can manage. But not-for-profit organizations, which are itself, trying to be self-sustainable, for them, these costs will have to be minimized to a level. But I also understand that if you are trying to portray transparency and regulations and disclosures, there will be some compliance costs which are coming in. But I think the attempt should be to minimize them so that these institutions don't feel a burden. And apart from that, we will also have to see that the primacy of social intent, which is the prima facie base for these institutions to kind of come up and register on the social stock exchange, where the list is, 16 items have been mentioned, but the 17th one has been put to the board and the government to decide. I think looking at our country and the kind of institutions that are involved in that, it could also be looked at enhancing that list to some level, because there are institutions which are otherwise also. I think the last and the very, very important aspect, which has been touched by one of the speakers in the earlier panel also, is the issue of self-sustaining, right? Even the social stock exchange needs to become self-sustaining. How they will do that, I think there are various modes of that which they can explore. And these institutions also, that has to come in. And last but not the least, again, I go back to my first point, which is, if it is an investment, it has to have a reward. So how would that be looked in? Or we'll have to wait and see if the social return is the motto by which these investors would go. So I think I've crossed the time limit which was given to me a little, but that's all from my side. Back to you, Haldiya ji.
To Meenakshi ji, indeed a great pleasure to hear to you after a long time, and such an excellent thought process on the new topic. Of course, we say it's a new topic, but it's something which is old. But I thought, and I thought, the what is new is the word enterprise has been added to it, and makes a whole lot of difference. As you rightly said, this would help in corporatizing and institutionalizing the social service, the activities, various kinds of activities for the benefit and service of the society. So that is very, very important. In fact, as I said in my inaugural address, we have been lacking this for many, many decades, I can say. Because what have been, we have moved from philanthropy, individual philanthropy, individual donation to philanthropy, to corporate philanthropy, to CSR, and then now we are moving towards the social enterprise. Unless you institutionalize the concept of the social service in the sense that it should be, and as a holistic approach, the social service may not be effective. CSR has helped a great deal, as 1.5 lakh crores have been channeled through the CSR into the corporates. That's in over the last 7 years. That's not a huge amount, but a significant, considering what has taken place in the past. But that is not enough. In UK, as I said, there are 1 lakh social enterprises providing jobs to 10 lakh persons, and India has a vast potential. We need to facilitate that, and that facilitation comes with the social enterprise. And you know, the new concept that the government, I'm sure, would address in the times to come is the startup social enterprises. Because this young generation is equally, and I would feel more inclined toward the social service and showing the entrepreneurship skill into the social service. Now, if you show entrepreneurial skills toward the social service, then you have to organize and manage it as an enterprise. The difference is that you should not have a commercial, or you should not have a profit motive. You can earn the profit, you should earn the profit, because that is how the businesses are sustained, but not with the purpose of profiteering. And also earn profit to not only to self-sustain, but also to deploy that profit or that internal generations into the social cause. So what you are doing is you are doing social service. Now, if this happens, then possibly the new institution would come up, as you rightly said. With the social enterprises would come many institutions. Maybe there would be funding agencies coming. Maybe there would be charity banks. Maybe there would be charity funds. Who would be exclusively, maybe there would be individuals, high net worth individuals, who would be focusing only on the investment into the social enterprises. And since today, as you also said, that this is based on the trust, individual trust and confidence. If I have trust in you, you are doing some social activity, I will contribute. But that's not the concept that we should aim at it. It should be oriented towards the project, towards the cause, rather than towards the because of the individuals. And I'm sure this concept of social enterprise would go a great deal. And this would require a lot of innovations. Innovation in terms of how do we organize social enterprise, how do we manage it, what kind of financial instrument. You cannot have conventional financial instruments to fund social enterprise. As the paper of the SEBI itself says, it's a zero bond. Now, obviously, it's a zero bond. The idea is that you do not earn, but then over a period, when the social enterprise have generate enough internal generations, then they pay back to the subscriber. So that's a great thing, and I believe with this, I would the next topic for today is the the future competition, financial prudence, and innovations to the business models of NPOs. Now, I think we should replace the word NPOs from the social enterprise. While the social enterprise word the SEBI has used in the context of fundraising, and the context of fundraising through the exchange, but then I would believe in the times to come, first innovation should take place, that we should replace the word NPO through the word social enterprise. And we have Mr. Vinay Datta to talk more on this, who is a senior consultant with Sustainability Standard Board of ICAI. Over to you, Mr. Datta.
Thank you very much, Aldiya ji. And let me start with the topic straight, and I have a limited time. So the first thing is like competition, the second term is innovation, and third is the business model. And very rightly told by you is social enterprises, because when we talk of social enterprises, we are talking both for profit as well as non-profits. Okay. Now, the first thing that comes to our mind is the competition when it comes to the NPOs, and we are talking in the context of all these three terms in terms of the social stock exchange. Okay, let me be, in the beginning itself, give that kind of a disclosure. Okay, so competition is long deemed as a very dirty word for non-profit, but we need to understand that it is necessary but undesirable reality. So the issue is why, we need competition and why this area is going to be very competitive in future. We all know the public perception about the NPOs in particular and social enterprises is that the founders and the promoters, they siphon funds, they manipulate funds, they divert funds. Now, when we come to the social stock exchange, the first issue to address this is disclosures. Okay, so essentially we need to understand that in future the lenders and investors will find very difficult. Investors, they will not going to put their money unless otherwise they are very sure that the money which they are giving is being used for the intended purpose or the social activity. Okay, because in the definition itself they say that primacy of social intent, that is something which has to be assessed by the social auditors when they do the social impact assessment. And now the next thing is, when we talk of competition, the first thing is we need to first identify who is the competitor, because you cannot fight with unknown soldiers. So in the context of social enterprises or non-profit organization, how do we identify as to who is our competitor? Okay, so first competitor, if you look into, is in the definition itself. They, in this SEBI circular of 25th July, they said there are 16 social activities. So essentially means that every NPO, which is going to be operating in a particular social activity, and within each activity there are sub activities, sub areas are there. Okay, so number one is you are going to compete with 16 plus multiplied by the sub areas, and then within your each area of social activities, you are going to compete, and which means you are going to compete with NPOs which are providing the similar services, or they have the similar stakeholders, or they have the similar geographic area in which they are operating, or they are having the same kind of donors or investors. So once you identify that, okay, then the next issue comes is how do you differentiate yourself? And that is where the role of the innovation comes, okay, because competition fosters innovation. Now, innovation, when we look from the perspective of a commercial organization, okay, the very definition of the innovation says that it is something which is new process, new activity, new product, new service, new ways of doing things which can be commercially exploited. Now that does not gel well with the NPOs, because NPOs are driven by duality of mission. Okay, when I say duality of mission, what does it mean? Which means the primarily, okay, their focus is, okay, non-profit, okay, social good, okay, for the benefit of the common people, okay, for bringing transformation in the life of the underprivileged people, okay, that is what is their primary objective. But at the same time, if we look from the perspective of competition, we say in competition and innovation, okay, like in innovation they say innovate, imitate or evaporate, okay. So and similarly in innovation they say the fittest will survive and others will die. So when we are saying the innovation here is very different in the context of a non-profit organizations, okay, because innovation here essentially means that NPOs has the process, the capabilities and leadership commitment needed to improve its operations and compete for increasingly scarce, philanthropic funds. And nowadays, of course, the new class of investors, what we call as impact investors, okay, because impact investors primarily are those people, okay, because earlier the philanthropic means you give and you forget, you don't ask for the outcomes, okay, you're not bothered about, okay, when you donate. But when you are an impact investor, you want to know whether the money which you are giving to the NPOs is being used for the purpose, okay, intended purpose, and you are very much interested in knowing. So which means if you are a NPO, okay, which is there for a long haul, okay, which is thinking of scaling up your activities, which is looking for long-term sustainability in business, essentially means then you will have to account for your actions, okay. And that is where the one area besides the what we call as the impact, the second area comes the financial prudence as well, okay. So financial prudence here essentially means that you should be able to, okay, account for that how the money has been utilized, the projects and the programs. And it is not only utilized, it is the optimum utilization which is more important, okay. Now normally people always mistake by the word what we call as optimum. See, you all know, okay, all of you have used the thermometer at least once in your life, okay, and we all know that the maximum kills a person. So when we say optimum, what we are trying to say is that you are able to provide these services, the products to the people, okay. Even if you are giving them free, essentially means you are putting the best use of the resources, scarce resources which are at your command. And in case you are charging, it essentially means it has to be affordable and there has to be value proposition. So when we say value proposition, then the next issue comes, which is business model. So value proposition here is from two perspectives. One value proposition is the donor's value proposition, and second value proposition is from the perspective of, okay, the beneficiaries, okay, the recipient. So in case you are touching the pain points, okay, in case you are able to create awareness, in case you are bringing change in their life in the long term, okay, their thinking process, their mindset, it is not just giving freebies, giving something free. What is basically very important is changing the mindset of the people, okay, target group, okay, so that later on they become, not only you become self-sustainable, they also have to become self-sustainable. Similarly, the value proposition of the donors is changing, the profile and demographics of the donors is changing now, okay. They are not simply philanthropics, they are people who are very much interested, as I said, in knowing whether the money has been used, okay, for the purpose, intended purpose for which it has been given. So in that sense, what we are saying is when we are talking of the business model, okay, of the NPOs, okay, number one, the business model should look at two types of planning. One is the strategic planning and second is agility planning. So when we say agility planning, we all know what is strategic planning. We are looking from long-term perspective, okay. But when we say agility programming planning, essentially what we are talking is, see, we live in a world which is, ever changing, and NPOs are no different. Like any other organization, they also have to have a, adaptability. So if they do not change their, working, their operations, okay, according to the changes which is happening in the society, and not only this, even the recipient and the beneficiaries expectations are changing, okay. So you have to align all your programs, your projects to meet the changing needs of the recipient so that you are able to create value. And please understand here, there is a difference between price and value. Okay, price is what you charge and value is what is perceived by the users. Okay, it is from the recipient's perspective. So later, initially, yes, if you are targeting people, okay, who are below the economic strata, who do not have the affordability, okay, who to whom certain services are not accessible, okay, yes, to them you may have to initially provide, but you have to make it very clear to them, okay, that nothing comes free. Because the question is, if a person, becomes having this kind of a mindset, with then you are be developing what is called as entitlement mentality. What we are talking here is NPOs, if they have to be self-sustainable, if they have to be innovative, if they have to have a, what we call as sustainable business model, then they have to create what is called as earning mentality among the recipient. So that is the value proposition we are talking from the beneficiary's perspective. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that innovation in terms of accessibility, which means adopting the technology. Okay, so essentially today, if you are an NPO which wants to scale up your business, which want to increase your reach outs, which wants to work on a national or international, level, you need to have access to technology. You have to have access to talent, because there is a myth, okay, that in case of NPOs, okay, the second class leaders or you don't get the good talent. The question is, today, if you want your business model to be robust, if you want to attract good people, then you will have to, again, attract people who are driven by that social objectives, but at the same time, you are able to compensate them. So very, very important is that resource mobilization should be very, very, robust. And it is here the social stock exchange comes now in the business model, because till now, if we see traditionally, how do, in any business, or NPOs was funding, own money means founders self-finance, loan money means debt, known money means friends and relatives, don money means donation, grants and subsidies. This is the way funding was coming. And in this case, it is almost impossible for any company to forecast that how much money they will get. And we have a case in point during the COVID, okay, that most of the NPOs, because they do not have any contingency funds, they did not have any reserve funds, and that is why their business model was not sustainable. Okay, so we need to understand that if you want to have a sustainable business model, then not only you have to constantly innovate in terms of services, in terms of operations, in terms of processes, okay, in terms of the way you deliver the services, okay. At the same time, okay, you have to look at the non-traditional way, and where the funds are available to you for long terms, and that is where the exchange comes, whether you are a for profit or non-profit. Yes, in case of non-profit, as Haldia ji has already said, we have ZC, ZP, zero coupon, zero principal. Essentially means where neither you have to pay any what we call as interest, nor you have to pay the principal. So question comes is, why then somebody will invest? Okay, please understand, we live in a society, okay, and all of us know, okay, that even when we started our career, our first essay we wrote was my best friend. And in this, the first sentence was human beings are social animals. It is only, when we grow up, we become economic animals and we forget the social part of it. So that social instincts are always there, okay, in all human beings. So people want to do good, okay, but the only thing is the profile of the investors have changed. They are very particular about the end use, and whether it is making real impact or is it only hearsay. Now here please understand that essentially what is it then they have to do for business model. So first thing is, in the future the fight will not be between NPOs, the fight will be between NPOs for creating, positioning, for branding themselves, okay. And branding means, in the second word in brand R is reputation, reliability, okay, reliability, consistency, okay. So an innovation in terms of accessibility, okay, that's why digital use, technology use, in terms of affordability, okay, which means providing goods and services, okay, which have value proposition for recipient at the cost which is affordable, awareness, adaptability, availability, okay. And to sum up, what I will say is that any NPO in future, if they have to survive and thrive, they have to look from these four perspectives. First is solution oriented approach, and for which they must be able to have a very niche area of operations. The second is access is success. Third is value proposition, and E is education and engagement. If they are able to meet all these four parameters, okay, they will survive, they will thrive, they will be able to scale up, they will be able to mobilize funds, okay, and they will be able to create real impact, okay, in the society. Thank you very much. This is all what I have to say at this point in time.
Thank you, Professor Vinay, for comprehensively emphasizing the need for innovation and also innovation in every aspect of functioning of erstwhile NPOs in order to convert them into a true enterprise. And the innovation, as you also said, is both in terms of managing the enterprise as well as also in terms of approach and attitude towards that. And as I said, we need to develop a concept of startup social enterprise, because gone are the days when we felt that the talent is not coming to the NPO activities. And so it is a job of old, retired, or the family patronage passion for the charity, which leads to the social activities. That concept is no more, and therefore I believe innovation is very important. But do the CSR and SSE has any interlinkages? Sorry, CSR and SSE regulation has any interlinkages? And what is that would what is that the social enterprise needs to do more, or what is that is not covered in the SSE regulations? Ms. Jyotsna Valiappa, I would request her to kindly take us through the topic.
Thank you, Aliaji, and thank you, ASSOCHAM, for doing this very, very interesting colloquium. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be a participant here. And for all the participants, I'd say that I'm one of the very few speakers here who comes from an absolute social background. And it underlines the fact that Mr. Shekhar had said earlier, that social stock exchange will have to be seen from a multidisciplinary approach. This session is basically, we have had lots of people from the finance talent, which is talking about all the social stock exchange, but it'll be extremely important to understand that the primacy of social impact is what is the foundational thing about social stock exchange. Okay, we are talking about social impact when social impact is the currency which we are talking about when we are talking about social stock exchange. So one of the first things that the participants and all the multidisciplinary actors in this, players in this social stock exchange will have to understand what is social impact. What is social impact? What is it that we are trying to float onto the exchange? Okay, so social impact is defined as the net effect of an activity on a community and the well-being of individuals in society. So whether you are a business organization, whether you're in service or technology or whatever, every business decision has an impact, positive or negative, on the community. Ultimately, it's the society which is getting affected, positively or negatively. And that impact, which is the delta change which is happening because of the particular activity, is what is being traded here. Yeah, so it's extremely important to understand that social impact is the currency of social stock exchange. Now, it's easier said than done because social impact, one of the biggest challenges will be that it is different for different people. Okay, it is different for different people. So for example, how do you decide that a program which is funding female infanticide is more important than a project which is funding malnutrition? How do you decide that? How do you decide that a women empowerment program in Maharashtra is less important than, let's say, a female empowerment program in Kerala? So what happens is that social impact will look different for different stakeholders, and this will be the thing that will beautifully mature in the social stock exchange over the next few years. We're just starting on it, so be ready for a bumpy ride. It's not going to be easy, but we're on the right track. I'm aware that we are really running short of time and we want to hear Hemant, definitely. So I'm going to go straight to the questions that have been asked of me. Is there an interface between CSR under Section 135 of Companies Act and the SSE regulation? Absolutely, absolutely. We are stringing a lot of the concepts that we have tried early, we have been maturing on, and you will see that all these different concepts will dovetail into one mature idea. So the CSR, the Companies Act 2013 talks about 15 different categories in which you can do your CSR projects. And mark my words, now when we're talking about social audit required in the social stock exchange, again, we have literally taken the same, it is definitely the same buckets with a little bit of a tweak here and there. We are talking about the same 16 topics, and then match it to the SDG. A few of the previous speakers talked about SDGs, and these, the Companies Act, the SSE, social auditing standards, which has been developed by ICAI, and SDGs will align. Now, it is very important for this alignment to happen, because remember one thing that we are all borrowing from is the targets that SDG has set up. Now, there are 17 SDG goals, and each of these goals has got targets. And India is a majority of our programs and schemes, the government schemes are aligned to these SDGs. So do you see that in the future, you will see that our targets for talking about or linking it to social impact will get more and more focused. So that would be my first thing about telling that, yes, the Companies Act and the social stock exchange and the SDGs at some time will sort of start dovetailing in the type of activities that are required. The second question that was asked of me is, what will change as to how social CSR projects are funded, implemented, and reported in the future? one thing, especially for all my colleagues from the nonprofit sector, from the what was traditionally called the NGO sector, there'll be a huge change that you're going through. You will go through, and the huge change that you're going to go through about the fact is you will have to speak the language, the business language of accountability and transparency. This is something that is going to be a steep learning curve, but extremely important. And because see, at the social stock exchange, you would be competing with the not-for-the-profit social enterprises and the not-for-profit this thing. You're under the same umbrella. Of course, there are different disclosures and all that stuff, but you would be tapping the same amount, the same source, and you will have to speak to them in the same language of accounting and transparency and the clarity in the objectives, the time frames, and the thing. So it would be, that would be one of the biggest change that you will be, I mean, most of the not-for-profit organizations will go through. The third thing that was asked of me is, will SSEs create competition between eligible NPOs, and how small size of NGOs would be able to benefit? I think it's a healthy competition, and I like the idea that while we are talking, there will be some NGOs and some not-for-profit organizations which are registering. I mean, that's the growth that we are looking at. We want more and more new ideas, and I am sure it is not an issue of the big NGOs eating away the small NGOs, but giving an equal playing field for the small and the big NGOs to work collaboratively on the social stock exchange. I'm aware of the shortage of time, so thank you very much, and I would be happy to take any questions after Hemant speaks. Over to you, Haldia ji.
Yeah, Ms. Josna, while you said you are alone here, I believe in the times to come, when you really emerge as an enterprise,
Yes.
have many of us, and even if not many of us, you would have commonality in the approach attitude that we, whether in the social enterprise or in a non-social enterprise.
Yes, definitely.
That's the first thing. And the second thing is that what you pointed out in terms of CSR, yes, the CSR has made the impact, but it had an impact with a limited scope and limited perspective.
Absolutely.
The third thing, which is important, once this CSR as an enterprise are recognized, and once the SEBI regulation has come, see what difference the SEBI regulation has made is that it has given the stakeholders as something to think about, something to act upon, and something which would create a movement for the social enterprise. We all know NPOs, and the CSR has activated NPOs, but they have not been converted into an enterprise. What that they are converted into an enterprise, and with that, the SEBI regulations would foster that competition, and what more it does is that when it brings competition, the impact of the competition is the improvement in the quality.
Absolutely.
Improvement in the impact assessment, improvement in the impact, because they would compete before the fund providers in terms of what they do and how they do, because the fund providers would not be lured by the returns that they would offer.
Absolutely.
It's lured by the work that they do and the mission that they have. So with that, what is important when we are talking about transparency is the accounting and auditing and the governance.
Absolutely.
ICI has brought out some guidance on this in the past, but then they are in the process, as the SEBI guideline says, has brought out, is going to bring out something standards on the accounting of small SSEs. We have Mr. Hemant Sabharwal. Over to you, Mr. Hemant Sabharwal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haldia, and thanks to ASSOCHAM for giving me this opportunity to share my views. Am I audible?
Yes,
you are audible, please.
Thank you. So I've been asked to speak on the topic of governance, auditing, accounting, and reporting from the perspective of social enterprises. And while we are short on time, I thought I'll divide my discussion in three parts. One is why looking at these aspects of governance, accounting, auditing, reporting is important. What are these requirements primarily? And I'll be brief on that because I think some of my earlier fellow speakers have covered those aspects. And what could be the next steps from the perspective of social enterprises who are thinking of raising funds through the SSC mechanism? So I think first of all, from an importance perspective, I think for India to achieve its SDG targets, I think social enterprises, as sort of defined by the SSC regulation, which means not-for-profit organizations and for-profit social enterprises, they play a very important role as they focus on addressing various socio-economic issues. And social enterprises have, I think, always faced a challenge in terms of raising funds for their activities. So I think from that perspective, SSC has come in as a very good opportunity for social enterprises, not only to sort of raise funds for their activities, but also to look how, I mean, they can make their organizations and activities more sustainable. And but nothing sort of comes easy. Can you sort of visualize the requirements of corporates when they get listed on a stock exchange? So there are so many requirements, and so many more stakeholders start looking at an organization when you get listed on a stock exchange. So while the requirements in a social stock exchange will be maybe different from other stock exchanges, but I think the expectations as regards governance, your processes on accounting, auditing, reporting, disclosures will definitely be significantly more than what the social enterprises are currently used to complying with. Here, I would like to sort of stress upon the importance of governance. I think an initiative of raising funds on SSC is not something that can be left for the staff of an organization to implement. It requires a proper and strong governance structure, a proper tone at the top, a drive from the board and management of the social enterprises to have a real intent of raising the funds, and not only raising the funds, but making an impact on the ground. And why sort of I say this is that it may require sort of social enterprises to think and act very differently from what they do now. And I think some of my fellow speakers earlier, Meenakshi, spoke about trust. So how do you build your trust in the eyes of investors and donors? That is through a strong and transparent governance framework. Also, I think Jyotsna ji spoke about that this whole mechanism SSC will be a big change for the not-for-profit organizations. So the not-for-profit organizations will have to think business-like to be able to sort of raise funds on SSC. Coming to what these requirements are, I think SEBI had set up a working group which released its report and recommendations, and then there were deliberations on the framework for SSC, and multiple documents were released on this. Now we have of course, we have the SSC notification from SEBI, followed by the framework for SSC. If you carefully see the framework that has been recently released in September, it is an attempt to sort of protect the interest of the investors and is focused on a lot of it is focused on governance, accounting, auditing, and disclosures. So I think instead of reporting, the word disclosures is better because it is much wider. Here it talks about disclosures not only in the financial sense, but from the perspective of impact as well. So in this respect, the framework talks about minimum requirements to be met by social enterprises for registration with SSC, which sort of talks about not only legal requirements on income tax, governance, etc., but also in terms of what is the past spend or the size of the organization. Then there are minimum initial disclosures for raising funds and information that needs to be included in draft fundraising documents. And here again, there are various sort of aspects starting from vision, mission of the organization to what is the target segment or the thematic areas that the organization wants to work in, the strategy, the governance, management, operations, finance, compliance. So lot of sort of aspects to be covered here as well. It talks about what are the risks the NPO sees to the work or the programs they want to initiate, and what are the sort of mitigation measures taken. So you see, I mean, I'm not sure NGOs or social enterprises are used to talking about these aspects in reporting or disclosures. Then there are sort of annual disclosures around, these are on three aspects: general aspects, ranging from name of the organization to organization goal, outreach, scale of operations, top donors, etc., to governance aspects, where you talk about the legal form, what kind of board structure you have, what committees you have, what are the roles, responsibilities, how do you execute or manage the board meetings, how do you action upon them, and several things in addition to all that. Then, of course, the financial aspects are also to be covered, which sort of talks about the financial statements as well as the auditor's report on that. And there is a complete guidance note given for disclosures on these sort of aspects. Also, I think earlier speakers talked about impact, and there's an annual impact report which is to be published, which again talks about the entire cycle of what is the strategic intent, what is the areas you want to work in, baseline, what kind of thematic areas, what targets you will have, how will you achieve that impact. So everything. And again, here another guidance note is sort of given to help NGOs or social enterprises to sort of report on these disclosures. I think, again, coming back to governance, the idea is to have a credible organization with a board and transparent sort of accounting and reporting and disclosures, which can be sort of evaluated or looked at by different stakeholders or evaluated by third parties such as financial auditors and social auditors. With respect to, I think, lot of I'm sure there would be a lot of questions in the mind of participants here in terms of what would be the exact guidelines in terms of accounting, reporting, etc. While some have been included in the reporting framework or in the framework for SSC, but I think SEBI has appointed Institute of Chartered Accountants as a self-regulatory organization to help manage these aspects. And I've been associated with the Sustainability Reporting Standard Board of ICI for the last 2 years, and especially on these aspects. And ICI is looking at coming up with social audit standards for auditors, and also looking at what accounting framework and accounting standards NPOs and social enterprises may need to follow. And for this, there some earlier technical guides are there. Again, ICI is looking at how that needs to be revised so that there is a clear sort of guideline in terms of accounting and reporting. Also, just wanted to mention one key fact here is that, I mean, most non-profits, though they have a solid intent to create a positive impact within the society, but they lack sound processes and procedures at times. And sometimes due to lack of bandwidth, resources and all. So here the working group has talked about also creating a capacity building fund to the tune of 100 crores, but that was in the initial recommendations. We are yet to see what more guidelines will be received on that. But I think that if it sees the light of the day, I think it will be another sort of channel through which social enterprises can strengthen their governance and accounting and auditing mechanisms. Now, coming to what should be the next steps for social enterprises wanting to raise funds through the social stock exchange. I think those who are serious on raising funds, I think while guidelines will come, more guidelines will come, I think you should already start looking at or assessing where the organization stands in terms of the requirement. What are the gaps? How can you sort of fill in those gaps? Should you be constituting a committee within the board and or a team within the organization to lead this initiative, including looking at what systems, processes should be there from a governance, accounting, disclosures perspective? So I think those are aspects which I would say organizations serious about raising funds should already start looking at as more guidelines sort of come in. And I would sort of, I'm conscious of the time, so I would like to end by saying that I think governance, accounting, auditing, disclosures may look like compliance requirements. But my suggestion or my thought is that for SEs, social enterprises to raise funds, you should not just wait for regulations but stay ahead of them. Start sort of looking at strengthening your governance processes. Use this opportunity to strengthen the processes in your organization and create a more sort of resilient organization which can help sort of address the various socio-economic issues in the society. So I think with that, I think I'll end here, given we've exceeded the time, and hand it over back to Dr. Haldia.
Thank you, Mrs. Abarwal. And the point that you made is very important. The spirit behind accounting and auditing and the governance rather than the compliance by the law. And it is important, all the more important for social enterprises. They are doing it not for the sake of others, but for their own benefit. Because if they are transparent, the fund providers would have trust and confidence in them. And when they have trust and confidence in them, they would be able to mobilize more and more funds. So with that, I think we had a wonderful session on different aspects of the social enterprises and social enterprise exchange, from innovation to corporatization to accounting, auditing to how it differentiates with the CSR to innovation. A very comprehensive.
Sorry, Dr. Haldia, I think we lost you. We can't hear you. Santosh, are you able to hear Dr. Haldia?
There's some audio issue at his end.
Haldia sir, we can't hear you.
Santosh, you are not audible.
Now better. Now all right, sir. Please go ahead. It's okay now. You're audible.
You are telling to me?
Yes, Haldia sir, in between we lost your voice. Now we can hear you.
No,
You
I
were
think
closing
we
your.
have already crossed the time that you set for us. I would normally prefer the the panelists to say finally concluding words if something they missed out. And if you allow us, we will take another 5 minutes and would ask each
Yeah,
of
surely,
them
sir.
just to give their brief concluding remarks. And I'll
Surely,
start.
sir, we can.
I will start with Meenakshi ji. Meenakshi ji, what is that you concluding message that you like to give?
Yeah, Hadia ji, I think enough has been spoken in this forum. So there are challenges and there are opportunities in anything and everything that we do. I think they are bound to be. But we should definitely look at this as an area for social enterprises to be there, make themselves more visual is what we call it in the corporate world, to make themselves feel available to the market and to everyone. And I think utilize this opportunity for tapping the pools of capital that are sitting there right in front waiting for us. While there will be challenges, which I'm sure by as we practice, we'll be able to iron out those challenges and emerge better. We're looking forward to India joining those other 3 nations as the 4th nation where social stock exchanges are a success.
Thank you. And Professor Datta?
Yeah, so I'll just say that number one, competition definitely fosters innovation. Innovation means creativity. Competition keeps us accountable, ability to account for our actions, okay, as very rightly said. And then last is because another thing which they have to learn, if you are saying that they're going to social stock exchange, they learn the new enterprises has to learn the art of crafting fundraising pitches. So which means they have to have very strong narratives, and that should also be followed up with facts and figures, So data is very, because people, today's new breed or new class of impact investors are not only interested in hearing your stories, they are also interested in supporting data. Okay, so that's where the disclosure part comes. And next and very important is that you have to have a very niche area in which you are going to work, because your scaling strategies, okay, detailing the impact points, revenue generating potential, all these things have to be very clearly articulated in your narratives. Thank you.
And the competition and innovation for providing better and more efficient and effective social
Definitely.
message. And over to Ms. Jyotsna, and I'm sure you and I wish you that you are one of those who are going on social stock exchange sooner or later. Ms. Jyotsna, are you with us?
I think she's not.
Okay, Mr. Heyman.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Haldia. So I would just like to reiterate what I had earlier said. I think social enterprises and NGOs have always faced a challenge in terms of raising funds. Here is now an opportunity in the form of SSC. It depends on the organizations how they can embrace it. You may take it as it may seem burdensome, but I think it is an opportunity not only to raise funds and make organizations more sustainable, but at the same time also building capacities within the organization, not only the larger organizations, but more community-based organizations, and sort of making a wider impact in the society. And so I think with that, I'll pass it on back to you.
Are Santoshji, I'm sorry. Do you have a questions?
We do have questions, but received in the chat box, in fact, from the participants audience side. We may prefer to share these questions with the speakers, and their responses may be submitted through email and sent to all the participants through email.
That's the promise that you are making.
Yes, I am promising I will share all those questions, because number of questions are too many, and I think those questions and the timing are mismatching to each other, the number of questions and timing actually. So would prefer to share those questions with from participants to speakers, and will accordingly do needful.
So with that promise, we end and over to you for
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Haldia, sir, all eminent panelists of this particular session and the previous session as well. And we look forward to be enlightened by your good self, respectively, in the further sessions to come forward. Many more such sessions to come on, because the requests are coming that there will be a lot of intricacies, implications, compliances, formalities to be filled to be getting listed on the stock exchanges. So likewise, therefore, we will have to go a long way as a part of the advocacy discourse and the educative discourse. So we promise that we will be in hand, holding hands together and doing many more such engagement with the stakeholders by and large. We may like to appreciate and thanks to all the associate partners, Renew Power, SpiceJet, TCI, Smart Bharat, Exchange Partners, Bombay Stock Exchange, IPF, Investor Protection Fund, NSC, supporting partners, SMC Global, Blue Sky and Sky Capital Services for extending the full support to these initiatives. And we look forward to your continued participation. There are few announcements to make here. That we will be hosting one program on 10th of this particular October, that is being organized together in association of IEPF Authority, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India, ASSOCHAM, Securities and Exchange Board of India, Association of Mutual Fund in India. And the theme of the program is harnessing the potential of socio-economic empowerment in India through protected, safe, and sustainable investments. And we are focusing the target audience on youth, women, and senior citizens. And this event is falling under the World Investors Week of International Organization for Securities Exchange Commission, which is beginning on 10th of October till 16th of October, and we are opening with this particular session at 11 a.m. on 10th of October. So we welcome and invite all the participants to take advantage and join us on 10th. And then another event in the same week, upcoming next week, is that we have the 7th Annual International Conference on Competition Law, Enforcement in India, the Past, Present, and Future. We hope some of the participants may be interested from this audience. That's where we thought to apprise and share this information with all of you. We look forward to your participation. This competition law event is happening physically on 15th of October, that Saturday, at 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. At Hotel Hyatt Regency, New Delhi. We look forward to your participation as well in this event. And just one another announcement. As this 3R information on the social stock exchange is quite useful, insightful to the audience, as we are receiving their feedback responses. So going forward, there is much more deeper details which is actually required towards initiating on how to get listed on the social stock exchanges and what formalities are required. So we are announcing here to have the master classes soon across country. We will be going through a series of activities on master class part, and the detailed information will be shared very soon to all the participants across NGO, societies and trust, as well as other stakeholders. And we request and invite your interest, response to that particular information. And thank you very much, lovely audience, for having you with us this afternoon and joining us in a very, very useful this initiative that ASSOCHAM has taken with all the support of the speakers, partners who joined us. Thank you very much. And if you have any further feedback, information to share, we request and invite your kind attention to send it to me on my email ID, santosh.parasar@assocham.com. Look forward to having you on another such session and engagement. Thank you very much. Thank you, Haldia sir, for your kind, taking taking your time out from busy schedule, as well as guiding us, being mentor for all such initiatives under your valuable leadership, being the chairman for the task force. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all the eminent speakers, Mr. Heman, Mr. Vinay, Ms. Meenakshi ji, Pammi Jaiswal ji. Thank you very much for your great contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.